The best place to hide the truth is in the pages of a book.
Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read.
Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Hello everybody, this is Nick, creator of Hayes Reviews. We're back for another live streamed, live reading of a book. We're continuing tonight with Vernon Coleman's Endgame, subtitled The Hidden Agenda 21. Although it's not that hidden if you know where to look, and where you need to look is in the books. I'm sure that comes as no surprise to anyone who's checked out any of the previous videos in this series. But if you're new, please hang on in there. This book's written in a way that you don't have to have checked out the earlier parts of the series to appreciate what's coming in tonight's reading. It's unique in that sense. It's kind of more like a dictionary or an encyclopedia or a reference book than it is a narrative or an explanation of some concept that requires the usual structure of a book. So it's a very entertaining read, and I've been enjoying it very much. We are on part 8 tonight. So this book's taken us longer than I expected it to, because initially when we started, I thought we'd be reading about a quarter of the book, but then we were very graciously and generously granted permission by the author himself to read the whole thing. And so that's what we're doing. So good evening to you all if you're tuning in live, and if you're watching on the replay, please remember there's a pinned comment below the video. It has timestamps, and you can use that to navigate ahead in the video if you want to go to a specific area or topic. Some of the topics we have coming up tonight include Omar Khayyam, life expectancy, Magna Carta, mind control, multiculturalism, Henry Kissinger, Rosa Quare, and Jargon, among many, many others. You might have figured out by some of the initials of those words there that this book is written in alphabetical order, and we're going to be plowing our way through, hopefully, 4 letters tonight, if we can make it that far. We got J. Oh, no, it's not 4 letters. I apologize. It's just 2. It's J and M. We're going to do J and M. JLM. It is 3 letters. JLM. That's the plan. So hope you are all well out there. We got Celine Lyon, Annie Me, Elizabeth, Kendall, LJ Bates, and Frank over on YouTube. And Rumble and Odyssey is just getting warmed up. People are a little bit shy. They're wallflowering over there. But feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe at any point during the show. It all helps the algorithms, the algocracy, the rule by algorithm to notice me, and it increases the likelihood that this channel will get shut down and memory hold. So actually, I take it back. Don't like, don't comment, don't share, don't subscribe. Just go and buy the books that we talk about and read them to your friends and family and loved ones in person. I always think that an actual in-person book club would be even better than what we do on these live streams. But good luck trying to get a bunch of people to get together in real life and sit in a room and listen to one person read a book. But you never know, right? Stranger things have happened, certainly over the last 5 years. But yeah, it's great to be back. We're going to be doing around another 3 hours tonight. And I've been really enjoying this book so far. I think Vernon Coleman has certainly honed his writing style over his many decades of being a newspaper columnist and author of books. He writes fiction, he does novels, as well as reports on various aspects of the medical industry, of health, of the pharmaceutical industry. And once we were all locked down and the big C event was underway, Vernon Coleman became a stalwart in the rebellion. Of all the people who were speaking out and asking questions and challenging the prevailing narrative, the orthodoxy that was being established, Vernon Coleman was there. He was on the front lines. He did even a live speech at some rally. I think it was in London. I saw a clip of him standing up with the microphone and speaking to crowds there. But mainly we all know him for his videos of an old man in a chair where he would write sort of an article or a spiel or a blurb, and he would read that to us. Very no frills video. It was low production. It was just an old man in a chair. That was what it was. But so powerful. And so many of us enjoyed those clips, and they gave us a way to express what we were going through. Because a lot of the time, we really get value from people who are good at explaining things that we might be struggling to explain ourselves. And so when somebody comes along, whether it be a Vernon Coleman or a James Corbett or a Richard Grove or a Mark Passio or a Jay Dyer or many of the types of people that we latch onto when we're looking for sense making and explanations of what's going on in the world, one of the benefits that we get from listening to these types of people is that we learn how to put things into words so that we can then express these things ourselves and talk to other people. And that's what it's all about, really. It's about getting familiar with the facts, getting familiar with the arguments, the objections, getting familiar with the agendas that we're living through so that we can describe them and point them out to other people and help raise awareness, help get other people to notice, to pay attention, to care. I think that might ultimately be the biggest challenge that we have, is getting other people to care, because most people don't care. And I heard Alan Watt talk about this on a blurb. I can't remember the year or which exact episode it was, I'm afraid. But he was talking in there about how the biggest problem is people don't care. They just don't care. You can explain to them the horrific things that are going on, that we are all tacitly supporting and condoning through our lack of action when it comes to speaking out, saying no, and trying to put a stop to these things. Silence is taken as consent. And trying to get people to care, to see how these things are related, to see how we're living through plans, business plans, as Alan would say, agendas that go back hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it's been the same for millennia, whereby we inhabit a pyramidal system, a structure with a tiny minority of psychopathic parasites at the top who live lives of amazing luxury and wealth and physical comfort and material excess. And they do it by convincing the rest of us to work for them and use their systems and be obedient to their laws and follow their rules and play the game that they themselves have designed. And we all know that when it comes to games, gambling, casinos, the house always wins. I'm trying to get people to care about this and point it out and say, look, this is the way it's been throughout history, and this is the way it's going to continue for your children and your grandchildren for the foreseeable future. It's a big deal, but it's hard to get people to care about it because people are inundated with distractions. They are surrounded by trivia. And I was remarking the other day about how trivial most of our entertainment and cultural touch points are. Trivia is the name of the game, right? Pub quizzes, it's all trivia. Who wants to be a millionaire? Well, if you want to be a millionaire, you just need to get really good at memorizing trivial information and regurgitating it on a quiz show in front of Chris Tarrant. And then Jeremy Clarkson later on, he took over the role. And it was very hilarious, wasn't it, when he said, we've got a check here, but we don't want to give you that. Remember, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? So there's this encouraging of trivia and the celebration of people who can regurgitate trivia And there's no end of these TV shows and game shows that put this message out. And this is what we're up against, because those of us who like to read books and pay attention to things and ask deeper questions about the structures and the systems that we have been born into, who designed them, where did they come from, why are they the way they are, it's very hard. There's no quiz shows about the history of this sort of thing. There's no glorification of it among the celebrities who inhabit our glowing rectangles on a Saturday evening in our living rooms. There's no emphasis put on it in schooling, in our academic institutions. Ironically enough, there are many institutes and think tanks out there who do focus on this stuff tirelessly, and they are well funded, and they have a lot of money, and they come up with the policy and the rules and the methodology by which the masses can be hypnotized and zombie walked into compliance with these systems. But they don't get so much airtime when it comes to the mainstream media. No, the mainstream media is there to keep you distracted and have you looking at the players. And by players, I don't mean the game players, the players who are who have skin in the game. I mean the players as in the actors. The players who play a role, who play a part, who are groomed and trained to play a part, to be on the world stage, to be ridiculed and laughed at, adored and followed, to drive couples and families and communities apart, to make them argue, to make them fight. Classic example, of course, is Donald Trump. He was a television, I don't want to say star, but he was. Doesn't he have a star on the ground in that place in America where they put stars on the ground for famous people? I'm pretty sure Donald Trump has a star there, right? Is it Malibu? I can't remember. I want to say Malibu. Is it Malibu? I don't know. My geography is not so good. I know there's a place where they do that, though. They put their handprints in it sometimes as well, I think. But he's an actor. He's a guy who reads from a script. And nothing's changed since he's been elected twice. He's playing a role. He's doing what he's told. He's reading from a script, as are all the household names, in my opinion. My opinion is, if you know their name, they're in the game. It's the people whose names we don't know, the families, the dynasties, the bloodlines, the people who are never under the spotlight, who can stay out of all that because of their unprecedented wealth and power and influence, that they can make or break the CEOs and the shareholders of all the corporations that do put all that stuff out, whether it's a news media organization or a influencer social media company. I think at the very highest levels, these people answer to another layer, another strata, which is above and beyond scrutiny. And I think it's always been that way. You might call them, Mark Passio would call them just Satanists. They could be thought of as an ancient priesthood. They could be thought of as dark psychologists who wield knowledge of human psychology, both individual and group, against the masses, and have done so since time immemorial. Are they possessed? Are they in service of other worldly entities and demons and forces and energies? I don't know. I don't know how any of us would be able to know that, except to try and infiltrate the organization. And no one's going to be able to infiltrate the organization because you have to be a psychopath to get up there and get in there. And if you're not a psychopath, you can't really fake being a psychopath, because you have things like a conscience and empathy and compassion and decency and generosity and kindness and all of those things that make us human, that make us glad to be human, all those things that we teach our children, that we want to embody and emphasize in our day-to-day lives, all those things, the better side to our nature as humans. You can't switch that stuff off and pretend to be a psychopath so that you can infiltrate their ranks. It just doesn't work that way. They've really got it locked down. So it's about psychopathy, predatory behavior, lies, deceit, mind control, manipulation, using and abusing anyone you need to in order to get what you want, and then establishing power, influence, and wealth and maintaining it for your offspring and traumatizing them into the same way of being and the same mode of being. I think this is what it's all about. Now, the good news, as always, is that this is a minority. And actually, it's kind of ironic because we're always told that we need to stick up for the minorities because the minorities are a danger, are in danger of being abused or forgotten or trampled upon or neglected by the majority. And it's the minorities who are weak and downtrodden. And they need our charity and kindness and support and love and generosity and hotels. And actually, it's kind of the other way around. It's like like some minorities. I mean, what do you mean by minority? If you talk about minority on a global level, you talk about minority on a national level. But if you talk about it on a global level, then there is a minority who are in control and they have the systems and the structures locked down because they've painstakingly designed and built them over the last 100 plus years. And whether it's a royal family with a king or a government with a prime minister or a communist party with a communist leader, I don't know what the term is. It's always a pyramid every single time, all throughout history. And that's what we're living in. And it's the shape-shifting rebranding of the pyramid system that we see throughout the ages. And that's really what we're studying. That's what Alan Watts studied. That's what he taught about in his many, many hundreds, if not thousands of hours of blurbs that he put out there. And it's a path that I am, and we are walking as well. It's been well trod by the researchers who came before us, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't follow and do our little bit to also learn and analyze and understand and preserve this avenue of exploration and information, because then we can pass it on and keep it alive, keep that torch burning. And that's what this channel is all about. So thank you for being here. Lee Blunt, Mind Hack as well, Tammy as well. Good to see you all showing up. That's what this channel is about. It's about learning and being curious and asking questions and recognizing that in this digital age where we are completely saturated by information and so much of it is artificial, it is made by software, it is cooked up and spun in a way to grab your attention and keep you mesmerized and hypnotized and enthralled. It's a white-knuckle ride trying to keep up with all that bullshit. And it's not doing you any good. It's not doing your blood pressure any good. It's not doing your melatonin production any good, trying to get to sleep when you've just scared the bejesus out of yourself by watching some of this infuriatingly scary alternative news that keeps coming out. It really gets in the way of our ability to connect with reality and enjoy our lives as human beings. And I think we don't have to cut it out entirely. I think we can have the best of both worlds. We can continue our education and deepening our understanding and our learning and getting the information. But if we do it by way of books instead, it's a little softer, it's a little gentler. It doesn't trigger your cortisol quite as severely. It actually, you can ponder it. You can think critically about it because you're not just being downloaded, which tends to be what happens when you look at a screen. When you're watching things on a screen, you're being downloaded. You're taking in so much more information than what your conscious mind can scan and assess. But when you're reading, you're active. You're following the words. You might be sounding them out. You might be following the logic, the argument. You can stop. You can pause. You can think. You can take a break. You can go back and read that page again. You can skip ahead, read the conclusion first, and make a decision about whether that book is worth your time. Like, do you ever do that with a video? Do you ever look at like, oh, This 2-hour documentaries come out. Do you ever go to the last 10 minutes, watch the last 10 minutes, and then decide if you're going to go back and watch the whole 2 hours? Video is a totally different beast than books. Books are so much more powerful. They're more worthwhile to spend our time on, in my opinion. And that's what we like to talk about and do on this channel. So that's what we're all here tonight to enjoy. We've got ESP over on Odyssey as well, saying, it's Keir Stammer, isn't it, the term? If I was a cat, I would look like a dead dandelion watching the news. I wouldn't recommend to anybody watch the news. I really wouldn't. I haven't been watching it for quite a long time, I must say. So, good to have you all here. I have a confession to make. I do not have a preamble ramble planned tonight beyond this little spiel that I just gave there. I don't have any tabs or Wikipedia pages to go through. I thought tonight we could focus on just getting a good chunk of the book read, because as you may know, if you've been hanging around, we have our next book lined up. We actually have the next 3 books lined up that we're going to do after this one. But the first of those 3 is Between Two Ages, Zbigniew Brzezinski, America's Role in the Technotronic Era, little paperback, written in the 70s. A lot of people talk about this book. I've heard it mentioned by some of the names that I mentioned already, Jay Dyer, Alan Watt, Richard Grove. This is a 1970 book. And he called it the Technotronic Era, but actually he was talking about the transhuman technocratic era. But the word technocracy had a bit of a bad rap. People were cottoning on to what it really meant. And so a bit of rebranding. Just like they rebrand this pyramidal, it's kind of hard to say that word, pyramidal. Just like they rebrand this pyramidal system of control over and over again, yet it remains the same. You know, and I'm not saying that material comfort hasn't been created, particularly in the near history. When I listen to my parents having grown up and the situations that they grew up in and the material comfort that they didn't have, how many of them had to share a bed and wear hand-me-down clothes and all the other, toilet at the bottom of the garden, these kind of stories that I heard from them. We now do enjoy a higher level of material comfort. Not everybody across the world, but in certain places, certain countries, right? We do enjoy that. But have you read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley? Just because you are more comfortable in your day-to-day life doesn't mean that your quality of life has improved. Unless the only measure you have is comfort. If the only measure you have in your life of the quality of your life is how many soft things there are around you, that's a pretty shallow life. And I feel like what's happening is we're trading these shallow physical material benefits for much deeper, more profound, more important and significant experiences that we as humans are capable of. And so the pyramidal structure, as it evolves and rebrands itself continuously over time, has to win our tacit compliance. Our consent is a better way to think about it, as I mentioned earlier. And how does it do that? Well, it gives us little gadgets and gizmos and trinkets and soft things. It increases our physical material comfort. Look how better life is now, because you don't have to walk to the bottom of your yard to go to the toilet in winter. Look how much better everything is now. You can see it. You can see that everything is better. Never mind the actual well-being of the souls of the human beings in this system, in this era that we're living through. Don't worry about things like soul and spirit. Don't worry about things like meaning, honor, challenge. beauty, creativity. Don't worry about all those things because we've got television and Netflix and Amazon, and you can buy things and have it delivered to your house the day after. Isn't that much better than having a meaningful life? It's kind of the stage we're in. It's killing with kindness, or killing with comfort, maybe I should say. And Brave New World's an excellent novel to get a sense of what that looks like. And I talked about that with Melissa of cuttingthroughthematrix.com. And we wrapped up another conversation on Tuesday night discussing the book, which is up there, so I can't reach it, but it's Snow Crash. We talked about Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson. We did nearly 3 hours discussing that book, and we could have gone on longer, but Melissa had another appointment, which I made her late for. I did apologize. But that's up now on Alan Watt CTTM on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, and Odyssey. It was a great, wide-ranging conversation. We went all over the place, connecting dots, telling stories, fleshing out the context, discussing the author, his background, his connections, the plot, things that made us cringe, red flags that we read, but also a lot of the predictive programmings that were encoded into that book. It's a really good one, and I recommend that conversation, as I do all my conversations with Melissa, not because of my role in those conversations, but because of Melissa. She's so well-spoken. She has a beautiful voice, beautiful soul, heart, mind, all of it. And her observations are always valuable. And I always learn so much when I get to talk to her. So it's a real blessing to be able to have those conversations. But yeah, we uploaded that. I'll put it on my channels at some point. But that's Snow Crash. But to go back to the point I was saying, this pyramidal structure, I'm just going to keep saying pyramidal as often as I can until I can actually say it without stumbling over it. So apologies for the repetition of that word right now. This structure, this system that we've been born into, that has been existent for a long time, it keeps rebranding, it keeps changing, it keeps refining its methods to the point where it's almost locked us all in permanently with no way out. That's where we're at. We're on the verge of that. We're on the cusp. That's the time. That's the historical era that we have all been born into, which is terrifying and exciting at the same time. There's never been a time where the tyrants have had such an opportunity to get under our skin and into our minds, to track, trace, and database everything about us 24/7, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. It's the wet dream of the technocratic tyrant, and we're living in their wet dream, which is a horrible image, and I apologize for I apologize for that one. That was not planned or intended. It was a total accident. A big grim, I know. But that's what we're living through. And we're very blessed that we have books and teachers and authors to refer to help us to understand these things. And that's what we're here to do tonight. We're going to carry on reading from Vernon Coleman's book so that we can polish this book off, and then we can start learning from Zbigniew. I did learn how to pronounce this. I heard the name on a TV show. I know, after all that, I admit that I actually do occasionally watch TV, but there's a guy in there called Zbigniew. I think that was how you say it. And then after we read that, we've got another 2 books lined up. So that's the plan for this evening. And what better way to spend a Friday evening? We got Plane Drifter, Hermit Tramps here as well. Matsi 11A is here too. Lovely. And David James Flood, what's going on? Good to have you all in the chat. So I'm going to take a sip. I'll review the comments and then we'll get into the book. David James Flood says, don't mention another book. I just bought all Patrick Woods and need to save up for more books. That's really my goal, is to impoverish everybody by bankrupting you all, by getting you all addicted to buying books. It's funny though. I do have another friend who really enjoyed the show, and he listened to Milner Fabian Conspiracy, and he was sort of intrigued and affected by that particular book that he bought, went out and bought a copy, and then he started also buying others. He got Fabian Freeway, and he just sent me a message. He was like, dude, I got the bug. Like, it was just funny, because I'm like, I know, man, say goodbye to all your spare money from now on. I'm actually I'm taking a month off buying books this month, because we got to budget a little more wisely in this month. So and then there's been some deals come up, and I've had to really restrain myself and exercise some self-control to not click that buy now button. So I'm trying. Just it's only the 6th. It's only the 6th. This month's gonna last a long time. Oh yeah, there we go. Abstract Conflict over on Odyssey. That's who I was just talking about. He says, been going hard, buying all sorts of books. Yeah, that's it. Once you realize the level of the deception and the trickery and the censorship that we are getting online, then it's just like the logical next step to go, I better stock up on some of these books, and just get them somewhere where I can look at them and refer to them and talk about them. Because, I think with the introduction of artificial intelligence, we're just going to see the censorship and the information control really increase exponentially, and it's going to get harder and harder to tell fact from fiction. So get yourself some books. That's the bottom line. Plain Drifter says, doesn't your drone-delivered lab-grown toxic meal taste so good in your lockdown neighborhood, in your LTN? Yeah, it's great. I love it. I really like the deep-fried cockroach bites that they deliver as well, as a little side dish. Doris says, we've come so far. One can download 10 films in 20 seconds. Yeah. I know. That's progress. That is progress. We are progressing towards what? Oh, you don't worry about that. It's just progress. That's all you need to know. As long as we are progressing, you can relax. We got Asmilia Dayful, which is a great name. Asmilia Dayful. Baby got to come first, Daddy. Hi, Nick. I'm over from Melissa. Watched you both yesterday. Oh, great. Thank you very much for hanging out and coming over to say hello. And yes, exactly. The baby's got to come first. That's why I can't buy any books this month. But once the baby's here, once we get to July, then it's all... No, I'm kidding. I've got enough books now to probably keep this channel going for the next million years, to use a Charles Galton Darwin term. But yeah, Asmilia Dayful, lovely to have you here. And if you watch the Snow Crash conversation, because I think that's what you're referring to, please let us know what you thought, because I thought that was a very enjoyable chat, and I hope you found it engaging, entertaining, and enjoyable. And there's another E, edifying. There you are. Abstract Conflict says, I saw a book in a secondhand store that was like ESP for babies. Wow. I hope you bought it and put it in the post and sent it to me. If you didn't, shame on you. Okay, let's get the book cam up and let's get into tonight's reading. Oops, nearly knocked over my cup of tea. Don't worry though, I saved it. So this has been entertaining, this book. It really has. Vernon Coleman's style is simple, easy to read, sort of conversational. You can imagine him. You can imagine saying like he would talk this way if you met him in real life. It's that kind of. It's written in that kind of style. There's nothing academic, and by academic I just mean it's not written in highfalutin language that's hard to understand. It is well researched, and the observations and the information that he provides, the commentary as well. I'd say it's academic in the sense that it's well thought out, and he obviously has lived and he's bringing his experience to bear on these topics. But it's not academic in the sense that it's hard to understand and hard to get into. It's very easy. Lieblin says, the first books I got that gave me a kick up the arse was the complete books of Charles Fort and Behold a Pale Horse, William Cooper. Do you know what? I actually have never read the Bill Cooper book, and I don't have a copy of it. I know I shouldn't admit that, should I? Asmelia Dayful says, yes, Snow Crash. I find all the chats with Melissa brilliant. Yeah, me too. I could listen to Melissa all day long. And thankfully for us, she puts out massive amount of content, so we do get to listen to her all the time, which is good. Mindhack says, I've heard that book's related to linguistics, Snow Crash. It is. It's a very strange book. It's kind of a parody. It's sort of an action caper. It's very silly, but it has these long sections which discuss linguistics in great detail and depth. So it's kind of it's worth checking out. But I would say instead of reading the book, just go and listen to mine and Melissa's conversation about it, because even though there's tons of interesting stuff in there, I couldn't say that I enjoyed reading it, and I couldn't recommend other people read it, if that makes sense. There's a lot of interesting ideas and concepts. There's some really silly jokes. You know, the kind of like the jokes that make you groan, dad jokes. So there's humor in there. But overall, I was rushing to get to the end of it so that I could just say I'd read it and then have the conversation with Melissa. And I enjoyed the conversation with Melissa infinitely more than I enjoyed actually reading the book. Hermit Tramp says, excellent chat with Melissa. Well, thank you. I appreciate your feedback and you checking it out. Okay, let's go over to Vernon Coleman. And we are continuing today. We finished on the last reading, last Friday. We finished with investment. And now we're continuing with jargon or buzzwords. So, jargon or buzzwords. Public relations specialists and psychologists are constantly at work inventing and redefining buzzwords to promote Agenda 21. What these bits of jargon mean bears no resemblance to what they used to mean and what most people think they mean. Yeah, and I'll go for that redefining word. And I will also add rebranding. So they have to always be rebranding themselves, and this is how they keep going. Because just as soon as you pick up on one aspect of what they're doing, they've already moved on, shut down that particular operation and opened up a new one across the street with a slightly different, boring sounding name. This is how all the groups keep going, and the think tanks and the institutions and the NGOs. They just open new ones all the time, and they probably have hundreds of new ones just opened and ready to go that are just lying there dormant. And then as soon as one of them gets too much attention or too much bad press, they just close it down and move it all over to the next one and rebrand it and change the messaging slightly. Carry on doing exactly the same work, advancing exactly the same agenda that they were before, but they just slap a different label on it and alter the description so that it sounds innocuous and boring and most people don't pay attention. This is, I think, a really underappreciated and overlooked strategy of these people is they just hide behind bureaucratic, boring sounding groups' names that are so innocuous, people just assume, well, it'll just be like... The classic one I always mention is the League for Industrial Democracy that came out of the Fabian Freeway book when the socialism became a dirty word. And so they were like, okay, we'll call ourselves democracy, they're Democrats, and we'll support democracy now. But it was the same plan. They just dropped the word socialist and put the word democracy in there. So this is why rebranding and redefining, you got to be aware of it and you got to pay attention to it and be very clear in your terms and demand that people are clear in their terms. And this will help you not get sucked into online debates and arguments if you insist somebody defines their terms up front first. And if they won't, walk away, because they're not there to have a good faith win-win interaction with you. They're there to have a win-lose interaction. They're trying to embarrass you or get one up over you and beat you in some way. And those people are not worth talking to. So next we got a quote from Thomas Jefferson. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. That's a good one. I like that one. Okay, next we got Jobs. Hopefully not Steve. No, he's not talking about Steve. The United Nations in 2020 said that 50% of all jobs are going to disappear, and since it's the UN that produced the figure, it's fair to say it was more of a forecast than a guess. Anyone looking for a job should perhaps concentrate on the world's fastest growing industry, the global warming fraud. And you might have seen that that little golem, Greta Thunberg, has been sailing around on a boat rescuing people, hasn't she, recently? Perpetrating and perpetuating the global warming illusion and scam, because it's actually costing people dearly. So it's not merely an illusion that doesn't hurt anybody. It's actually a scam that is disenfranchising people. All right, next we got Boris Johnson. Quote, "It is time we had a grown-up discussion about the optimum quantity of human beings in this country and on this planet." Some people might be shocked at that quote, but I don't think we would be, because we know that Boris Johnson is the son of Stanley Johnson, and Stanley Johnson wrote a book called Life Without Birth, which is a 3-word summary of the plot of Brave New World, in fact, and the sort of target society that these maniacs have in mind for us. Okay, next is journalists. Even by the end of 2020, many apparently intelligent journalists did not realize that what had happened during the year had been deliberate rather than accidental. Some blamed politicians and advisors for making mistakes, though none of what had happened was accidental or a result of poor thinking. And others genuinely seemed to believe that those questioning what had happened were merely conspiracy theorists. The quality of journalism plumbed new depths in 2020. And I'll apologize now if you could hear the squeaky door over there. That door just recently started squeaking, and I've yet to oil the hinge. It's weird how doors do that. It's a brand new door as well, and I just painted it, and then suddenly it started squeaking on me. And it's one of those things that you never think about until you actually use the door and it squeaks at you, and then you're like, oh yeah, I've got to oil that thing, and then you immediately forget about it, and then next time you're like, oh yeah, this squeaky door, I've got to oil it. Yeah, the joys of running a house. David James Flood says, and yet the Johnson family has loads of children. Exactly, yeah, rules for thee, but not for me. Yeah, David James, he actually says that in the introduction to this book. He talks about how hypocritical it is for him to be talking about this because he's got 4 or else 5 children or something. That's on the introduction, before chapter 1. Melvin, what's up, Melvin? How you doing? Says, makes you sick, don't it? Yes, squeaky doors. Infuriating. Asmelia Dayful says, spray furniture polish on the hinge. Oh, now there's a tip. Now there's a tip I hadn't heard of before. I was just going to go straight for the WD-40, but I'll try the furniture polish first. Thank you very much for sharing that. I'm going to have to buy some furniture polish now. All right, judgments. We are all encouraged to make judgments about one another. If we buy something, we are encouraged to give marks to the manufacturer, the retailer, and, if the product was delivered, the person who did the delivering. Online, we are constantly begged to give our views. Criticism is encouraged. If we have watched a video, we can give a thumbs up or a thumbs down in the way that the Roman citizens decided the fate of slaves in the amphitheater. This rediscovered habit sometimes seems to be almost as cruel. Books and films are reviewed without being read or watched. All this is training for our role in the new world of social credit. Well, that's an interesting connection. I'd never thought about that before. But yeah, all the thumbs up, thumbs down, like, dislike, how easy it is to click that. You don't, those buttons are available whether or not you've read the article or watched the video. That's a great point. You don't have to watch. It's not like those buttons are locked off and they only activate once the video has been watched, which would be easy to code into the website, right? You could easily code it so that you have to watch the whole video before the like, thumbs up, thumbs down buttons are clickable. If they can put paywalls behind things and they can put pop-ups and all this other stuff, you could have it this way. But no. You can get onto a video and immediately give a thumbs down. Oh, that Nick Hayes, he's made another video. Thumbs down. Screw that guy. Which actually doesn't happen that much. So haters don't really pay much attention to Hayes reviews, which is good. But you know that you can organize, I don't know what they call it, some sort of, is it Twitter bombing or something, where whole groups of people will go and downvote and dislike a certain person's posts just to annoy them. But it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that as being training for the social credit. That's a very interesting idea. He says, the tragedy is that cowards will happily say in print behind a nom de clavier what they would never dare say to someone's face. That they are heartily encouraged to be hurtful is shameful and a reflection of our times. The young, the sensitive frequently find it too much to bear. Suicide is getting ever commoner, in part because of online abuse. When comments are turned off, as they sometimes are by video makers and so on, who are exhausted, drained by the meaningless, ignorant abuse, these cowards cry censorship, though truly only those with something real to say can be censored. The mindless abusers deserve to be eliminated in the same way that graffiti is removed from a wall. Well, yeah. And I kind of agree with Nigel Watson, who says, if it's your video that you're putting up and your channel that you're maintaining, then you don't have to let anyone write anything under those videos, right? They can go and start their own channel. You're not restricting someone's free speech. They can go and start their own channel, their own blog, their own Telegram group, whatever, Twitter page, and get their message out. But instead, they want to nitpick and criticize and tell you, hey, you're not speaking about my little favorite topic, therefore you're a shill. This doesn't happen to me so much, but I know it happens out there quite a lot. I think a lot of it's probably just artificial. It's probably driven by bots who are just, which are, I shouldn't say who, I should say which are just programmed to be contrarian and divisive and populate threads with the kind of content that gets people arguing. We know Facebook has ran experiments in which they try to increase the amount of sadness on the platform, for example. So why wouldn't they roll out bots to do exactly the same thing and just get people arguing and fighting? Of course they would do that. Okay, we got Omar Khayyam. Quote, the moving finger writes, and having writ moves on. Nor all your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it. Ooh, that's pretty good. I like that one. Cry all you want. I said it, and I'm not going to take it back. Kindness. We should be kind while there is still time. Ooh, that gave me a bit of a shiver. That gave me a bit of a chill reading that. We should be kind while there is still time. The idea that there may come a time where we cannot be compassionate and empathetic and thoughtful to each other that's terrifying. That's really scary. But if we get driven to the point of having to choose between food and water and, being nice to a person, what are most people going to pick? LJ says, kindness costs nothing, which is true, and I agree, which makes this all the more ominous. What does he mean, while there is still time? What is this world he's envisioning in which kindness is no longer possible. Maybe he's thinking of, when there's no more humans, when we've all been eliminated, and the earth has been reduced to a nice, clean rock, as Alan Watts, the spiritual entertainer, put it. Maybe that's when there won't be any time for kindness. But yeah, kindness costs nothing. A smile, just being human to other people and recognizing that they're humans too. There's not enough of that in the world. And that's largely due to screen addiction and social media use and smartphones. Mindhack just joined the book club. Awesome. That is great to hear. Thank you very much for joining the book club. I appreciate it. We're going to be... I didn't mention... I'll mention at the end the book that we're going to be studying in the book club. I'll mention that a bit later. If you go and have a look at the book club, you can see it, though. There's a picture of me with it. So there's a little teaser. So this next section is Henry Kissinger. Quote, "Today, Americans would be outraged if U.S. troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be ungrateful. Tomorrow they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond. Whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will pledge with world leaders to deliver them from evil. The one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with this scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished." I'll read that again. Individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being, being granted to them by their world governments. And that was Kissinger giving a speech at a Bilderberg meeting in France on May the 21st, 1992. I'm glad that he gave us a little footnote and reference there, because I was going to complain if he didn't. Rosa Quare, quote, "Agenda 21 is about destroying independence, culture, society, economy, and human lives." There it is in a sentence, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. Land. The Scottish government has already announced its intention to take land out of private ownership and into public ownership. There has been no talk of compensation. This is in line with the United Nations Agenda 21. You will own nothing and you will be happy. Sustainable development goals. It's not sustainable to have people working on the land, using it, making it productive, keeping animals, growing their own food. That is true sustainability. If you can produce for yourself the things that you need, that's sustainable. If you have a little patch of dirt and on that you can keep some animals and grow some plants and butcher the animals and eat the plants and produce your own food, that is true sustainability. But that is never, ever what is pushed, what is taught when people, or what is meant by the average Joe and Jane when they talk about and think about sustainability. So that's a very easy thing to point out to people and to push back. It's like, unless your plan for sustainable development involves getting rid of people's use of supermarkets and Amazon and multinational corporations and taxpayer-funded services, then then you're not talking about real sustainable development. You're talking about something else, and I want to know what that something else is. Try saying that next time your do-gooder family member starts bringing up sustainable development. Okay, next section is laws. The European Union always used to call them rules or regulations, but in my book, if I can be fined or sent to prison for not obeying a rule or a regulation, then the rule or regulation is a law. New laws are appearing rapidly. Some are local, some are regional, some are national, and some soon will be international. Everything we do is now governed by legislation, and the new laws are often enforced by private security firms. So this is the public-private partnership sort of creeping in. The reasoning is always the same. In a time of national crisis, people must obey the laws. Since the beginning of 2020, governments everywhere have been busy making new laws with unprecedented enthusiasm. These new laws, however, are not designed to protect people or property, the usual function of laws. Governments are no longer interested in arresting traditional lawbreakers such as murderers, thieves, or fraudsters. Those lawbreakers act with impunity. Only around 7% of all crimes in England and Wales lead to anyone being charged, let alone convicted. Soft drug possession and even dealing have been effectively decriminalized. Only 5% of thefts lead to prosecution. Only 1.4% cases of rape lead to prosecution. The new laws which have been introduced are designed to control ordinary law-abiding citizens. Police and prosecutors are taking these laws very seriously. Yes. Yeah, law. The thing about law is that if it's man-made, then it's relative and it's arbitrary. And it's very difficult to justify relativistic, arbitrary law. And by justify, I mean explain to everybody why they should follow it. Because if it's just stuff that a bunch of guys have made up, a bunch of people have made up somewhere, but you cross an imaginary border, an imaginary line in the dirt, and then then what would get you locked up and thrown in a cage on one side of that imaginary line is now totally fine and acceptable and permissible. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. And this is how you know it's relativistic and therefore arbitrary. And things that are arbitrary and relativistic tend to lead to destabilization, discord, discomfort, conflict, argumentation. It's not a good long-term strategy to build arbitrary, relativistic anything into society, into the fabric of society, right? Frank Lennon says, when you add all the laws, rules, regs, etc. together, you end up with a freedom-inhibiting, thick, thorny, impenetrable briar. Nice. That's a good way of putting it. And you know that the people who concoct all this bullshit don't follow it themselves. Doris K. says, Rosa Quare wrote Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21. I bought a copy and she graciously signed it, which I was very grateful for. Sad thing is, she died a few years back. Yeah, I'm aware of that book. I don't have a copy, but thank you for mentioning it, and it's great to make everyone aware of that. It's Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21, Rosa Quare, and I think she also did speeches and presentations and lectures that you can still view online, or you could. I don't know if you still can. Asmelia Dayful says, I'm ashamed to say I don't read. How dare you? I used to love reading, but I can't stop mind wandering when I pick up a book or I fall asleep. Is it just me, or maybe my glasses or mind crash from a shock? 2017. It's not just you. It's not just you at all. There's many different factors, and I couldn't tell you what the factors are without getting to know you a little better in your particular case. But a lot of people struggle with this, and it's partly why I started the channel, because I knew a lot of people out there would probably wish they could read more, or they could have the attention, the appetite, and the energy to read, but weren't able to for many different reasons. And so I thought, well, I can give a helping hand, and I can do book reviews and book readings, and people can listen to me do it instead. But then I also have started the book club, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And the whole purpose of book club is to help people establish a reading habit, build it into their daily routines, because it all comes down to focus and attention, and that's like a muscle. And if you want to increase your focus and attention, then you need to give it a workout regularly. And depending on who you are and each individual, that workout might be 5 minutes. It might just be a 5-minute exercise of focus and concentration, and then you build it up from there. And so there's things that can be done, and the book club is my sort of place where I'm going to help people do that. So feel free to have a look at it. I'll give out the link to it at the end. But all hope is not lost. I'm sure if you used to read a lot, then it'd be like riding a bike. Once you get the habit back, you'll be off to the races. Well, you won't be off to the races because you'll be at home by the fire, curled up with a hot cup of cocoa, reading a book instead. Doris K says the first rule of book club is tell everyone about book club. I love it. That's great. I might steal that. I'll put it on the about page. Rosa Quarry was featured on Sheep Farm Studios yesterday, says Asmelia Dafel. That's a mouthful, but it's a great name. Great. Yeah, Sheep Farm, they had Melissa on, and now they've had Rosa Quarry on. I think it's only a matter of time before I get to talk to those boys. They're only up the road from me as well. Frank Lennon says, yep, Rosa was the best. She was a well-studied expert on Agenda 21. She spoke extensively on the absolute evil of UN Agenda 21. May she rest in peace. Well said, Frank. I agree. Rest in peace, Rosa Quarry. Oh, a smile a day full, Nick. Lol. Right, that's what it says. I thought it was a name. I thought it was Asmelia. Oh, I'm going to keep calling you Asmelia. I think it sounds better. Asmelia Dayful. It sounds like a character from Harry Potter or something, doesn't it? Well, you're Asmelia to me now. Okay. Yeah, Celine Lyon, I know, but I don't care. I'm going to stick with Asmelia. Right, let's carry on. Leaflets. Those newspapers, television, and radio, which make up mainstream media, have been bought with massive amount of advertising revenue. So we cannot use mainstream media to share the truth. And our use of the internet is massively limited. But the enemy is moving fast, and through its control of the mainstream media, which must now include much of the internet, such as YouTube, has a huge reach. We need to move fast, and we need to widen our reach. Things are never going to go back to the real normal unless and until we make that happen. Distributing fact-packed leaflets is an excellent way to help share the truth. It's something that worked well for Napoleon Bonaparte when he escaped from the island of Elba and faced with the French army, turned them from enemies to followers with a skillfully written leaflet. I didn't know that story about Napoleon Bonaparte. I wonder how he worded that. I like the idea of leaflets. The problem is people don't read. Like, who's going to pick up and read a leaflet when they've got a smartphone in their hand? So, not that I want to discourage anyone from doing the leaflet thing, but that's just one difficulty that I perceive. All right, lefties. Lefty loonies are behind Agenda 21, Wikipedia corruption, and the global warming cult nonsense. Liberal. The term liberal has been redefined by usage and now refers to a leftist extremist. Yeah, liberals used to have a toilet because liberal comes from the same root as liberty, which also shares the same root as library, which is liber, which I think means book. So there's another reason to buy and read books is library and liberty literally have the same root word. Licenses and certificates. All those licenses and certificates we need, they were planned years ago to disrupt and force us into living in fear. They were designed to be expensive and disruptive. If you don't have the right license, then you can't work. And then when you have one license, they want another and another. It's reminiscent of that scene in Horse Feathers when Chico Marx persuades Groucho Marx that he needed to keep buying yet more tipster books if he were to succeed in his gambling ambitions. I'm not familiar with that film. Lies. Every few minutes, another piece of madness darkens my day. I discovered that we are advised that if we find someone who has collapsed and is not breathing, then the first thing we should do is to put a cloth of some kind over the victim's face so that we as Good Samaritans reduce any risk of infection. I'll just pause there and just tell you that if that sounds crazy, proof that never happened, he's exaggerating. That is not an exaggeration. It's exactly 100% true. When I was back in my, I was working for a charity as a support worker during lockdowns. I was in a supported living building, had a bunch of flats in there, and the residents all had learning disabilities, and so there had to be staff on site just to help with various things. They were very independent, but there was a few things like budgeting and planning their day and housework, various tasks that they needed help with. And this flyer appeared, and I think it was a St. John's ambulance flyer, and it showed resuscitation techniques, and this was on there. It showed a person passed out on the ground, and the other person came along and and it said, put a cloth over their mouth. I remember it vividly, because I remember sitting in the office, looking to my right, seeing it pinned up on the wall, and just swearing and saying, what the, is that for real? And and then that, so I just want to tell you that if that, in hindsight, you might read that or hear that and say, no way, that's crazy. There's no way that's true. It is absolutely 100% true. I've probably got a picture of that somewhere on my phone. I might be able to dig that up for you and show it on the next live stream. We'll see if I can remember to do that. But yeah, that was actually the advice. Put a cloth over the victim's face if you found someone who was collapsed and not breathing. Put a cloth over their face before you attempt mouth-to-mouth. Crazy. So continuing. This seems rather like overkill to me, since we have already established that the patient isn't actually breathing. But hey, I understand that the official policy these days is to kill patients who are frail, weak, disabled, elderly, injured, or just plain nervous. The media, of course, has poked and pushed and prodded at us all, printing every threat made by the politicians as if it had come down from heaven, carved in stone. In several years, sitting through every important debate in the House of Commons, wrote former political correspondent Auberon Waugh, I never consciously heard anyone tell a word of truth. Waugh was enraged by the lies, the deceits, and the manipulations of politicians. The role of journalists, wrote Auberon Waugh, is to ridicule, humiliate, and generally torment politicians, pour scorn on everything they propose to do, and laugh at them when they do it. I wonder what Mr. Waugh would think of the way the world's journalists have crept and bowed to the ubiquitous Mr. Gates. I don't think there are any journalists left working in the mainstream media. There certainly aren't any at the BBC. Topping it all are the stupid fake fact-checkers who spend their days spreading nonsense around the internet and denying obvious truths. Most so-called fact-checking is done by or for prejudiced organizations with a commercial agenda, and most of the checkers appear to be teenagers who don't know how to spell research, let alone do it. Brilliant. Life expectation. In the early part of the 20th century, millions of people lived in damp, cramped conditions and had very little decent food to eat. Drug companies and their many supporters in the medical establishment like to claim that their products are responsible for improved life expectation since those days, but the figures prove that to be a falsehood. Drugs have changed our lives in many ways, but with the exception of antibiotics such as penicillin, first introduced just in time for the Second World War, they have not had any major impact, and it is not difficult to argue that many of the preparations put on the market have done considerably more harm than good. It is, for example, difficult to claim that benzodiazepine tranquilizers have done anything to improve the quality of human life. Prescription drugs such as benzodiazepines and some painkillers are the causes of the biggest dependency problem in the world. Even the good drugs, the antibiotics, are now often not as useful as they once were. Overprescribing and the wholesale routine use of antibiotics on farms have meant that antibiotics which once saved lives are now often useless. Doubters will, of course, claim that life expectation today is much greater than it was and that, therefore, medical care must have improved. This is a fallacious argument. If you look at the figures, it is clear that life expectation rose over a century ago when the number of babies and infants dying fell considerably. A little over a century ago, it was commonplace for a woman to have half a dozen babies, but for only 2 of them to survive. It was these infant deaths which lowered life expectation figures. If lots of babies die before they are 1 year old, then the average life expectation is brought down dramatically. If one person dies at birth and another dies at 100 years of age, their combined average life expectancy will be 50 years. But if most babies survive, then the average life expectation rises equally dramatically. Back in Victorian times and even earlier, humans who survived infancy and childhood commonly lived into their 70s, 80s and beyond. The absence of relatively clean drinking water and proper sewage systems meant that serious infections were big killers in the 19th century, and it was infectious diseases such as cholera which meant that infant mortality figures were appallingly high. The death rates fell notably when fairly clean, uncontaminated drinking water supplies were introduced and proper facilities built for dealing with sewage. If you look at the figures, it was not medicine which helped reduce the number of deaths from infectious diseases. The death rates were largely falling long before modern drugs and inoculations were introduced, but better living conditions. And since the start of the 21st century, life expectancy in most so-called developed countries has been falling, not rising. Chronic diseases, mental illnesses, cancer, and just about everything else have been rising. Infant mortality rates are no longer as good as they were. Dementia is endemic, and childhood diseases such as ADHD and autism are commonplace. The incidence of diabetes, particularly maturity-onset diabetes and asthma and allergies, have all risen. Why? Well, there are several simple answers. Firstly, the quality of food being eaten has fallen dramatically, and many people eat far too much. Second, nearly everyone now takes prescription medicines or over-the-counter medicines on a daily basis. Side effects from the prescription medicines go unnoticed because doctors don't look for them and don't care. Third, the number of carcinogens in our environment, in the soil, in the air, and in our homes has risen. Fourth, the amount of exercise most people take has fallen. Machines have made it easy for humans to sit around and take little or no exercise. Fifth, the amount of stress has rocketed. Sixth, drinking water is heavily contaminated with chemical pollutants and with dangerous residues of prescription drugs, including chemotherapy drugs, so dangerous that if spilt, they have to be cleaned up as though they were nuclear waste. Tranquilizers, sleeping tablets, antibiotics, and hormones. Seventh, immune systems have been damaged by stress, poor sleep, poor diet, and absurd inoculation programs. I am going to tab that section with a little pink tab because I think that was really good. He hit on so many key points there in just what was it, like two pages? But this is what I mean when people say, "Oh, you don't know you're born these days." We used to have to get up at 6 a.m. and lick the road clean and work for 72 hours and then go back to bed. You know, the Monty Python Four Yorkshiremen sketch, right? Certain things were worse in the past. Your material comfort was worse. You didn't have the gadgets, the doohickeys and the gizmos. True. Certain things were better, though. And people don't want to talk about the things that were better because they just want to believe in this mystical thing called progress, which is never defined, is never explained, and yet we all have to be grateful that we are experiencing it. And I think a lot of people, it turns off their ability to be critical of the present era that we are living through. You got it so much better than I had it when I was young. You should be grateful for all the technocracy and the data collection and the mind control. Right? You should be glad that these technocrats are trying to rule every single aspect of your life. We used to have to decide how we would spend our lives. No, I'm being a bit facetious, but there's a balance to be struck. There has to be some sort of restrictions and limitations because otherwise nothing can happen. You got to have some kind of I'm not. There's a word that I'm reaching for. I'm not quite getting here. Like when you come to design something, you want to have some restrictions in place. Something that places limitations on what you can do, because that helps you with the design. That helps you with the make decisions about what you want to do with that piece of land or that building or that business or that painting or that sculpture, right? If you just had infinite access to infinite possibilities all the time, it would be much harder. But if you introduce some limitations, then you got something to work with. So This is part of the problem of unlimited, never-ending, novel digital information, because there's always something new to watch and listen to and check out. It's very hard to tear ourselves away from the black mirror long enough to read or go for a walk, enjoy a sunset, do some exercise, paint a picture, cook a meal, any number of actual creative, worthwhile activities that we could be doing. All that time is sucked away and basically destroyed because we are inundated with infinite novel information by way of our glowing rectangles. So it is quite strange. Boundaries, yes, lean line. Yeah, you need some sort of boundaries, constraints. That's another word as well that I was trying to get there. Constraints as well. Constraints on what you're able to do, right? So in this, my dad has told me before that when he was younger, he was very constrained in what jobs he had available to him. It was like be a joiner, an electrician, or a plumber, or a painter. That was basically it. There was no higher education. He didn't have access to that, so those were the options that he had. And he went down the route of electrician, and he's done really well for himself and got to a good place and been able to retire early and paid the mortgage off, and he's in a good situation now. So those constraints actually served him pretty well in the long run because he operated within those constraints, made the tactical decisions that were right for him, got a good pension, cashed it in, and retired early. That's great. That's the dream, isn't it? Retiring early. I'm ready to retire now, but I'm way too young to retire. I'm probably never going to be able to retire, but I feel ready to retire. I'd like to just read my books and teach people and talk to them and do this all day. That would be my retirement. But having constraints is a good thing. And what a lot of young people now feel kind of tortured by is all this possibility and all this messaging that comes through the glowing rectangle that tells them you can be anything, you can do whatever you want, you can be super successful, you can be an influencer, you can have a business, you can be an entrepreneur, you can earn all this money every month and fly around the world being a digital nomad, you can be an artist, you can save the planet by fighting global climate warming change. You can be a porn star, you can be an actor, you can have your own following, you can do anything you want on YouTube. It's like there's almost too many options on the table, and then you get that analysis paralysis, and then you get a lot of people not doing much of anything except playing computer games and eating takeaway food and shopping on Amazon and just not having much of a life. And that goes back to what I was talking about in the little intro that I did tonight, where those things that really make us human are sort of under attack and at risk of being lost. As Amelia Dayful says, when I'm in nature, I just keep looking at it, calling them bastards, the chemtrails, thinking of the wildlife being tortured, etc. Tell you my mind won't switch off. That is really tough. That is like, what I would say to that is, that is what I would call, it's a term I've started using recently, it's called parasite programming. This small parasite class, they want us all to be walking around like that, like you just described. Angry, spiteful, pissed off, insulted, furious, frustrated, overwhelmed, you name it, all these different negative emotions. They love the fact that they can ruin your walk in nature by getting you to be angry at them. That's a victory from their point of view. And I call it parasite programming because these are programming. It's their programming. It's like television programming. It's the programming that they've laid out for us that we've taken in through schooling, through relationships with other people, through the media we watch, the music we listen to. Everything is weaponized. And we take in their programming, and then it turns us, it leads us to be, it interferes with our ability to enjoy reality and connect with reality and just be and be human becomings is another phrase that I like to use. I've started using recently. We're not human beings. We're not just like being. It's all well and good to just be, right? You can sit there on your cushion and meditate and just be, but it's better to be becoming, right? And by that, I mean doing something, working towards something, improving yourself, becoming better, becoming more compassionate, becoming kinder, becoming more generous, becoming more creative, becoming braver, becoming more courageous, becoming more informed, becoming more articulate, becoming more influential, becoming more confident, right? There's so many great things that we can embody and achieve as human beings, human becomings, but we have to choose to become those things, is my point. And if we're working towards those things, then we're, that's a middle finger to the parasites. That's a middle finger to the tiny minority of criminals who really want to ruin our ability to enjoy a walk in the woods or a sunset or the sound of the birds singing. I don't know if that helps at all, but I think, and I say I really understand where you're coming from when you say that, because I have a very overactive mind as well and struggle to switch off, and it is tricky. It really is. But it's not you that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, it's not that you can't switch your mind off and your mind is broken in some way. It's like you are just a victim of this parasite programming, and you can undo it and unpick it. And overwrite it, if we want to stick with the computer metaphor. Although sometimes I kind of resent the computer metaphor to describe human beings. We're not computers. So, Celine Lyon says, higher education or more indoctrination. It is just more indoctrination. And that's like when you're so hooked on the abuse that you keep going back to the abuser. That's like when, if you're not totally fed up with education by the time you get out of university, I mean, you should probably be fed up of it at the end of primary school. I think Frank Lennon says, be a human doing rather than simply a human being. Yeah, I like that. That's good too. I often think like the people who rebel at school, who don't want to sit down and be told what to do, what to think, and have to put their hand up to go to the toilet and all this other nonsense and have their day ruled by the bell, the Pavlovian conditioning. I often think they're singled out as the troublemakers, but they're probably the bravest, the most switched on, most intelligent, most fully formed and fleshed out humans than the people who just acquiesce to that system and go through it without questioning, like me, like I did. I didn't question it. I just went through, got the grades, did the exams, got the grades, went to university, got the degree, which I was just thinking about the other day. You get a degree at university, but you also move through the degrees when you join the secret societies. For example, Freemasonry has famously 33 degrees, doesn't it? Probably more beyond that. But there was a quote, I think again from an Alan Watt talk, where he was saying that to move through the degrees is akin to taking entities into your body. You're downloading the parasite's programming. That's what you're doing, right? You're taking these entities into your body, whether that be a belief or a worldview or an action or an opinion or a habit of some kind. These things are being installed in you by degrees, and this is how you come to be under their mind control and full of their programming and unable to enjoy, the beautiful, simple things that we all should be able to enjoy and have a right to enjoy. So, yeah, that kind of brings it full circle in a way. So, we got this next section. Oh yeah, and Celine Lyon says 360 degrees. You end up right back where you started. I used to work in a language school, and it was called Apollo 360. And I always used to make that joke. I was like, if you do 360 degrees, you just end up back where you started. You might want to do a 180. If you're lazy and you're not making any progress, do a 180 and start making progress. And, but if you just do a 360, you're just back where you started. You haven't made any progress. So I always thought it was a bit of a strange from a marketing point of view, but I wasn't in charge of that part of the business, so I just had to roll with it. All right, this next section is light bulbs. People in Europe spend their days in artificial light produced by LED bulbs and the special new mercury bulbs forced upon citizens throughout Europe by the European Union. It's widely accepted that the incandescent light bulbs which were banned were far more relaxing than their replacements. In another of its crazy attempts to save the planet and prove itself to be stuffed full of environmentally conscious bureaucrats and politicians, the EU decided to ban the sale of traditional incandescent light bulbs, the ones which have the tungsten filaments which dangle uselessly when the bulb was blown or been dropped. Consumers have been forced to replace old-fashioned light bulbs with new compact fluorescent bulbs known as CFLs to the average acronym-happy Eurocrat. I love the way he writes. He's just so he's so scathing, but really on point in the way he does it. Like, he's not scathing to be mean. He's scathing. It's like from a place of love. It's kind of like your granddad or your uncle or your dad pointing out to you the ways that you're being a dumbass. You know? To the average acronym happy Eurocrat. Brilliant. These, they claim, use only a fifth of the energy. There are, inevitably, a few problems. First, the new light bulbs burn out faster if turned on and off a lot. So the bulbs will last longer if they are left switched on when no one is in the room. This wastes energy but reduces your expenditure on bulbs. Second, the lighting produced by the new bulbs is so dim that most people won't be able to read by them. Angela Merkel, the German politician who put forward the proposal that we should all use these new bulbs. And just as a side note, I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that Angela Merkel won the Charlemagne Prize. If you don't know what the Charlemagne Prize is, it's for people who bring immigrants into Europe. And it's named after Charlemagne, of course. And the first person to be awarded the Charlemagne Prize was Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi in 1950. And I'm pretty sure Merkel got it. Yeah, Angela Merkel got it in 2008. Ursula von der Leyen got it this year. Jewish people got it last year. Just European Jews got it last year. And Vladimir Zelensky got it the year before. And then it's also been given to Macron, Pope Francis, Donald Tusk, Tony Blair, Bill Clinton. Didn't Kissinger get it? Yeah, Henry Kissinger, 87. He got it. Edward Heath. And a bunch of other people. Churchill got it in 1956. So if you just want a good thing to look at to explain the continuity of this agenda, that Charlemagne Prize is really worth looking at because of where it starts with von Coudenhove-Kalergi and where it goes, and it's still going out and being awarded. It just shows you that it's all part of the plan, just a long-term agenda since 1950. Well, it's before 1950, but since 1950 has been the okay, we're going to be up front and center now about what we're doing to the European people in their homelands. Continuing with light bulbs. Angela Merkel, the German politician who put forward the proposal that we should all use these new bulbs, has admitted that because the energy-saving home electrical appliances get hot. Oh, here, hang on. I skipped a page. The energy-saving bulbs she uses in her flat take some time to warm up. She often has a bit of a problem when she is looking for something she has dropped on the carpet. The result will be lots more people falling over and breaking limbs, and lots more people suffering from headaches. The consequence will be that many people will simply buy more lamps and use 2 or 3 bulbs where they previously used 1. Third, the new bulbs are much heavier than old-fashioned bulbs. This means they will take more energy to transport. Fourth, the new bulbs are much larger. They won't fit into all light fittings, so vast numbers of perfectly good light fittings will have to be thrown away. Fifth, they cost up to 20 times as much as the old bulbs. This is a really great section because he's showing you how you got to scratch the surface and dig a little deeper to see the insanity of all of this sustainable development, Agenda 21 nonsense, save the planet nonsense, right? Because it sounds very good and easy to accept on the face of it. Oh, energy saving light bulbs. Let's all start using them. Yes, that'll be great. But you got to think about these kind of things he's now listing. The weight, the cost of production, how long do they last, transporting them, all these other aspects to the production of that item, which comes into your home. What is the environmental damage after the fact? Because you should know that fluorescent bulbs are filled with all manner of toxic stuff, and if you smash one of those, it's basically like you got to get a toxic cleanup crew to come around with hazmat suits to sort that out. That's how dangerous it is to break one of those things and inhale the stuff that's inside it. Didn't have that problem with the old bulbs. Didn't have that problem. But continuing, he might mention that now. Fifth, they cost up to 20 times as much as the old bulbs. Sixth, the CFL light bulbs produce a much harsher, less relaxing light. That's true. Moreover, they don't produce a nice steady light like an incandescent bulb, but flicker. They flicker at 50 times a second. If you try to read with one of the new bulbs, there is a chance that your head will start to swim. Will the new bulbs trigger fits? I have no idea, but I wouldn't bet against it. They will at least cause discomfort. It seems pretty certain that the new EU-approved bulbs will cause migraines and dizziness. And this is a perfect time to explain to people who might not know or be curious why I wear these glasses. And it's literally to filter out that harsh, bright, clinical white light of most LED bulbs. Is to filter it and to lessen its impact on my melatonin production, to protect my ability to fall asleep when I want to fall asleep and not be lying awake in bed at night. Although I'm sure these only do so much, right? That flickering, that 50 times a second flickering, that reminds me of the flicker rate of televisions and all the research that must have gone into what is the effect of the flicker rate on the human organism, on the mind, on the whole, what's the word I'm looking for? The nervous system of the human being who's looking at that screen. And I bet my bottom dollar that the same kind of research has been done into these bulbs and is known how this flicker rate affects us when it goes into our eyes and onto our skin, and that it's been calibrated to have a very specific impact and outcome on our health and our lives, because everything has. Seventh, because they flicker, the new bulbs can make fast-moving machine parts look stationary. How many limbs will be lost as a result of this? Eighth, normal CFLs cannot be used with dimmer switches or electronically triggered security lights. Dimmer switches and electronically triggered security lights will have to be thrown away, wasting vast amounts of energy. Ninth, the EU-approved bulbs cannot be used in ovens, freezers, or microwave ovens because they don't work if the temperature is too low or too high. 10th, the new allegedly low energy bulbs take 10 times as much energy to manufacture as the old bulbs. 11th, CFLs need more ventilation than standard bulbs and so cannot be used in any enclosed light fitting. 12th, the EU-approved light bulbs use toxic materials including mercury vapor. This is a bit of a problem because the EU has banned products containing mercury vapor from landfill sites. Used CFLs will therefore have to be collected and disposed of separately. Experts advise that you telephone your local sanitation or refuse department if you wish to dispose of a used CFL bulb. The British government has admitted that the bulbs contain mercury, which is a deadly poison, and has warned if a low-energy bulb is smashed, the room needs to be vacated for at least 15 minutes. A vacuum cleaner should not be used to clear up the debris, and care taken not to inhale the dust. Use rubber gloves and put the broken bulb into a sealed plastic bag, which should be taken to the local council for disposal. Unbroken used bulbs can be taken back to the retailer if the owner is a member of the distributor take-back scheme. Otherwise, many local waste disposal sites now have the facilities to safely collect and dispose of old bulbs. You will, of course, probably have to drive to the disposal site, which will take up fuel and energy as well as time. You'll have to do this every time a bulb is broken. There will almost certainly be a disposal charge because getting rid of dangerous light bulbs without being able to bury them will be quite a problem. 13th, to work at their best, CFLs must be kept on pretty well continuously. This means that if you are going to get the best out of your new EU-approved light bulb, you'll have to get used to sleeping with the light on. 14th, The new bulbs, which the EU is forcing us to use, will aggravate a variety of health problems. Patients with lupus and autoimmune disease will suffer from many symptoms, including pain. Patients with light-sensitive disorders will suffer more. The new bulbs could trigger eczema-like skin reactions and could produce skin reactions that lead to cancer. 15th, some CFLs need breaking in for about 100 hours before their brightness level stabilizes. So every time you install a new bulb, you may have to put up with potentially serious health problems, headaches, tripping over, for 100 hours or so. 16th, CFL bulbs may interfere with the remote control for your television or other equipment and may cause static noises on your radio or cordless telephone. One expert advises that if this happens, you should switch off the light. Another has found that a cardboard tube fashioned from an old lavatory roll center and glued onto the relevant sensitive part of the television will minimize or eradicate the problem. I do not recommend that you try this at home. Electrical appliances get hot. Bits of cardboard tend to be flammable. Great. So, all of these solutions that they're giving to us are not all that they seem. You have to think a little wider and deeper about them, as Vernon Coleman just so excellently and eloquently demonstrated. I'm just going to have a sip. Next, we've got Abraham Lincoln. Quote, government of the people, by the people, for the people. Doesn't exist and never has and never will. I just added that second bit to the quote there. Okay, we've got Magna Carta. The original idea of the Magna Carta was no taxation without representation. The people of Boston who didn't want their tea may have thought that they were being original, but they weren't. The Magna Carta also introduced the idea of expelling from England all mercenaries who had come to England to do harm and introduced the concept of habeas corpus, where no one can be held in custody indefinitely without a trial. The Magna Carta gave the English people basic rights as individuals and gave England rights as a nation. Parliament was devised as a means of obtaining popular consent. All well and good, but again, I'll go back to my earlier comment about if it's man-made and written down on a piece of paper, then it's arbitrary and relativistic. Unfortunately, even if it seems to be doing good like Magna Carta, it is not a piece of paper written by human beings that gives you your rights. Malfeasance. Malfeasance, doing something illegal, particularly applies to public officials. It is defined as willful and inappropriate action or the giving of intentionally incorrect advice. The whole of the British government policy since March 2020 has been false. The house arrests were never necessary. The closure of hospitals and hospital departments was never necessary. The dumping of old people in care homes was never necessary. Around the world, millions of people will die because of what seemed like mistakes. But I don't think that they were mistakes. I don't believe those people died through simple incompetence. Neither do I. None of the government's advice was appropriate. None of it is defensible. The same is true of governments in the US and elsewhere around the world. And though I am no lawyer, it seems to me that there must be a case that our governments and their advisors should be taken to court and charged with malfeasance or misfeasance, whichever seems most appropriate. In the UK, I hope and believe that within months, our disreputable government ministers will soon be starting long prison sentences. Government advisors will also spend the last years making number plates or sewing mailbags. Staff at the BBC will not be immune since the BBC is in essence a state broadcaster and has a responsibility to provide fair and balanced information. The penalties for malfeasance or misfeasance can be very severe and involve many years of prison. Editors and news editors should prepare for a long stay at Her Majesty's pleasure. And lower-level civil servants should be worried too. Defendants at Nuremberg learned that I was following orders doesn't cut it as a defense. Thousands of snotty bureaucrats, brutal police officers, and dancing health workers are going to have to acquire a taste for porridge. In addition, I suspect several million people will be entitled to take legal action for damages. Those who have lost relatives to this crime will be able to sue for millions, and those whose businesses have been ruined will also be able to sue. But how many of them have and will, I don't know. I like the idea of all that he just said, but it seems pretty unlikely to ever actually materialize. Just because most people don't care, like I said in the intro. Meat. I have for years argued that you cannot be an environmentalist and eat meat. I never expected this philosophy to catch on quite so suddenly. Yeah, I see where he's coming from. The way animals are treated, particularly in like the factory farming of meat, is totally despicable. I think that's the only way to say it. It's absolutely disgusting. So it is a contradiction. It does seem like a contradiction for sure. I see where he's coming from. Media. There is sadly now a huge amount of evidence showing that in recent years, most branches of the mass market media around the world have been taken over to promote messages which suit governments, commercial entities, and lobbyists working for them. It saddens me to write this, for I have spent much of my life writing books, columns, and articles and making television and radio programs. I no longer believe that any part of the mainstream media will ever again produce any proper journalism. Real exposés are a thing of the past. Even big book publishers have become embedded within the political establishment. Despite this criticism, a few books have been published, usually by very small publishers, which show just how the media is now controlled and how the messages we read, see, and hear often bear little resemblance to the truth. Larry Beinhardt's book, Fog Facts, which was published in 2005, is subtitled Searching for Truth in the Land of Spin, and the search he describes is a harrowing one. Beinhardt's novel Wag the Dog was turned into a film with the same name starring De Niro and Dustin Hoffman. It provides a magnificently ironic look at how the media can be used to deceive and manipulate. One of the most disturbing trends in the years since 9/11 is that there no longer seem to be any consequences for political lying, writes Beinhardt. The secret Downing Street memo, secret and strictly personal, revealed at the very least that the head of British intelligence had been informed by his Washington counterparts that the White House was cooking the books on the information that they used to create a war in Iraq. And he adds, the failure of the media to take responsibility is the reason that political lying, especially in the soft-core public relations style that misleads, has no penalties anymore. By 2020, it had become clear that the media was no longer merely complicit in allowing politicians to lie, but it was actually contributing to the deceit, allowing itself to be used as a propaganda tool and no longer trustworthy in any meaningful sense of the word. Udo Ulfkott's book, Prostitutes, is boldly subtitled Embedded in the Pay of the CIA, and is an account of the way journalists are bribed and used as intelligence assets, receiving favors and speaking fees from those whom they please. It's a revealing story about the corruption of the mainstream media. The real point is that if journalists don't stay on message, they can lose their jobs and their perks. Ulfkott's startling conclusion is that the entire political and media network has been bought. The greatest corruption is at the highest levels. A paper that claims to be independent when it actually serves hidden interests is guilty of fraud, writes Ulfkott, who claims that media corruption may actually be worse than political corruption. It is certainly not difficult to argue that media corruption is the most potent weapon in the hands of the politicians and billionaires attempting to force through the social credit and other hideous aspects of Agenda 21. Ulfkott's solution is quite simple. We should simply stop buying or using the material produced by corrupt publishing and broadcasting organizations. In the UK, this means finding a way to refuse to pay the BBC license fee, legally, of course. And the way you do that is you just stop watching any live TV, unplug, just throw your television away, just get rid of the TV. You'll thank me later, honest. But yeah, they can't come round to your house and say, oh, you've been watching, you're like, on what? There's no TV here. So explain to me how I've been watching your live propaganda broadcast, Get rid of the TV. That's the way you fix it. He says, when enough of us stop buying the products offered by these media houses, when we no longer click on their internet articles and we switch off their television or radio programs, at some point these journalists will have to start producing something of value for their fellow citizens, or they're going to be out of a job, writes Ulfkott. Yeah, I was thinking about this idea of boycott and how powerful it is, but how it doesn't really get focused on or get pushed as a solution, you know. And I was thinking about a website of like BYOB, like bring your own boycott, and just trying to organize and coordinate people to actually boycott things, organizations, companies, institutes, products, whatever, just to send a message, banks, you know, just to send a message, just to actually organize boycotts, because I don't know if that's happening out there, but it seems like something that we could actually do. We have a choice where we spend our money. All right, the next section is medical ethics. There is no such thing as medical ethics or medical confidentiality these days. When I qualified as a doctor in around 1970, I was told that I could take the Hippocratic Oath if I wanted to. It was optional. I doubt if many modern medical students have any idea what the oath contains. The General Medical Council, a quango masquerading as a charity, masquerading as a government department, masquerading as a private fee-earning company, long ago decided that the Hippocratic Oath was out of date and should be tossed out, so patients who think doctors still take the Hippocratic Oath, which contains the well-known phrase, "first do no harm," should know that the oath was cancelled and that doctors no longer take it. Doctors are no longer allowed to respect patient confidentiality. Now, I didn't know that. So we got a bit here. Actually, hang on. I'm going to tab this page, this part on media, because I think that was a really good bit, and I would like to come back to that. So, that book as well, the Udo Alfcott book, Prostitutes. There's a great interview with him where he explains, you know, the ideas, his experiences, what led him to the writing of the book, and it's one that I've been meaning to get a hold of, but, you know, so many books, not enough budget. That's my problem. And not enough shelf space. Right. Asmelia Dayful says, I've actually sent an email to a Whole Food online to ask if I can order over the landline. Not heard back yet. Yeah, I hope you do. LJ says, boycotts hit them where it hurts. Yeah, I think they would. I think if enough people could get together and do that, they could send a message. But unfortunately, the kind of circles that we swim in, you know, the truth and freedom community and all that, whatever you want to call it, is just as rife with division and divide and conquer as any other organization, which is a shame. So, medical ethics. There is no such thing as medical ethics. Yeah, we just did that bit, didn't we? Okay. H.L. Mencken. The urge to save humanity is always a false front for the urge to rule it. The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace armed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary. Yeah, well said. I'm not sure who H.L. Mencken is. Perhaps an author. Mental illness. For many years, there has been a rising interest in the incidence of mental illness in Western societies. In the UK, the royal family, particularly Princes William and Harry, have talked of little else but their own mental health, their stresses and so on. And they and other members of the royal family seem to feel that, although they have not bothered to go through any formal training, they are entitled to offer help to those with mental illness. It's kind of like Bill Gates. Following their bizarre example, countless others are now offering their own versions of help in online programs, and small fortunes will doubtless be made by some of them. Individuals have been encouraged to consider themselves mentally ill and to ask for medical treatment, invariably pharmacological in form. As a result, the number of citizens addicted to mind-numbing tranquilizers and antidepressants has been rising rapidly in recent years. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the benzodiazepine group of tranquilizers became popular and fashionable among both prescribers and patients. It seems clear that this process was part of the overall plan to make a large portion of the population dependent upon drug companies and to numb them so that they become more subservient. That's kind of in the Huxleyan sense as well, isn't it? How do you write Huxleyan? I've buggered that up. Huxleyan. It's like that, isn't it? The Huxleyan sense. Numbing people with drugs. Soma. Give them the soma. Right. Microchips. Pet owners are accustomed to having their pets marked with an implanted chip. In some parts of the world, it's illegal to have a dog which has not been microchipped. But the same thing is happening with people too. People in Sweden, Japan, Russia, and even parts of America now have chips under their skin. The chip is usually put under the skin in the hand so that it can easily be waved under a scanner as a form of identification and to help the owner make purchases without using a credit card. In some cases, however, the chip is placed just below the hairline on an individual's forehead and close to the frontal lobe, since the changes in body temperature, which occur most notably in that area, can be used to recharge the chip. In experiments, chips have been implanted which can be used to control or improve the brain. In the USA, the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act gave the president the power to force citizens to accept any type of ID, such as microchip, that is, quote, considered necessary, end quote. Middle classes. The people who will suffer most from Agenda 21 will be the middle classes. The rich will avoid the high taxes by moving to islands or large ships. The very poor, particularly those in Africa, will die unnoticed and unmourned. John Stuart Mill, quote, over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign. Yeah, so this is the idea that all property rights begin with this foundational and fundamental right to be the sole owner of one's own body, right? And then it kind of goes out from there. But you own your body. No one else can own your body. So the next section is mind control. There was much excitement among the easily excited and fairly ignorant when American billionaire Elon Musk showed how he could use a small remote control device to control an animal which had a receiver implanted in its head. The surprise was that anyone took any notice of this. During the 1950s, a Yale University psychiatrist, Dr. Jose Delgado, examined mind control methods as part of the MKUltra program. It had been known for a century and a half that if wires are poked into the brain and an electric charge is passed through them, there will be different responses from different parts of the brain. After his experiments, Delgado concluded, quote, physical control of many brain functions is a demonstrated fact. It's even possible to create and follow intentions. By electronic stimulation of specific cerebral structures, movements can be induced by radio command by remote control. That was nearly 3/4 of a century before Elon Musk conducted his much publicized breakthrough experiment. Indeed, if Musk or the journalists who wrote about his experiment had done a little research, they would have been able to read about Delgado's experiment in my book, Paper Doctors, which was published in 1977. This is what I wrote. Quote, in the 1950s, Dr. Delgado of the Yale University School of Medicine showed that two cats, normally quite friendly, could be made to fight fiercely if electrodes implanted in their brains were given impulses. Even when it continually lost its fights, the smaller of the two cats continued to be aggressive when stimulated. In one dramatic experiment, Dr. Delgado wired a bull with electrodes and then planted himself in the middle of a bull ring with a cape and a small transmitter. The bull charged, but was stopped by Dr. Delgado pressing a button on his transmitter. The bull screeched to a halt inches away from its target. Dr. Delgado has reported that animals with implanted electrodes in their brains have been made to perform a variety of responses with predictable reliability as if they were electronic toys under human control. Similar experiments have been performed with human beings. The patients selected had all proved dangerous and had shown that they had uncontrollable tempers. By electronic stimulation, every patient was controlled. More detailed accounts of these experiments can be read in Physical Control of the Mind by J.M.R. Delgado. So 1977, Vernon Coleman was telling you about Delgado's mind control techniques. David James Flood says Delgado was a real sicko. Continuing. Today, of course, the receptors required for the control of the human brain do not need to be implanted surgically. Indeed, modern receptors are so small that they could be placed in the body via a far less intrusive method, an injection, for example. No comment. Mind space. The British Government Cabinet Office and the Institute for Government funds a program called Mindspace, which deals with ways to use behavioral theory to influence public policy by creating incentives, using people's habits, and taking advantages of the egos of citizens. The scheme is, of course, funded by the very people who are the targets, taxpayers and voters. Yeah, that's a really good point as well. That all this weaponry, all this technology that's being used against us, in a lot of cases, we've paid for it. And actually, just let me go back to the previous section on mind control. It's worth mentioning that the David Hughes has put out on his Substack the Omnivore Symposium, Part 2, which is a 5-hour video, and it's got presentations from Patrick Wood, David Hughes, and an Australian woman and a guy living in Japan. I can't remember their names, but their presentations were extremely good. And it's talking about where this kind of technology is at, this sort of mind control technology described here that Delgado was playing with back in 1977. That was a long time ago. Not a long time ago, but it was a while ago. Things have progressed rapidly since then. And this Omnivore presentation is scary because they dive into the patents, they dive into the areas of research. They talk a lot about what's called dual-use technology. Dual-use just means there's a military application for it, and there's like a non-military application. So it's a kind of sneaky way to get funding and to develop tech that's going to be used in the military, but they don't tell you that that's what it is. So they just call it dual use. It's just dual use. It just has 2 uses. One of them's military, and the military stuff that gets funded, developed, researched, invariably gets used on the public at the end of the day, right? That's the purpose, the long-term goal. So David Hughes's Omnivore Symposium with Patrick Wood and Catherine Austin Fitz is highly I highly recommend it. It's a great presentation. Give you a really good overview of where we're at and what we're facing, and the fact that we're already in a war. You know, it's a war that's being waged every day, and all the technology that we use is part of the weaponry, and that's backed up in, of course, Surveillance Valley. Wherever my copy of Surveillance Valley's gone. I always like to have that hand. Oh, it's here. It's under a pile of books. I can't get it. But yeah, Surveillance Valley, the military origins of the internet. Essential reading to understand the context behind what I was just saying. Timmy. What's going on, Timmy? How you doing? Good to have you here. I bet you get sick of people saying your name in that way, don't you? Sorry. But I saw it and I couldn't help myself. But at least I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Asmelia Dayful is well, you weren't here for that, so the less said about that, the better. So, the Mindspace program includes ways of promoting pro-environment behavior and a, quote, good society. This is, in simple terms, brainwashing. The Mindspace scheme is full of the sort of tricks used by advertising copywriters, but taken much further along the line towards blatant manipulation and control. The Mindspace policy came to the fore when the UK government was desperate to find new ways to control public behaviour. It was thanks to Mindspace that millions of people were forced to adopt behavioural patterns which did them far more harm than good. I just noticed as well, ESP asked a question. If I wanted a book on learning the basics of the nutritional values of the human body from birth to retirement, where would I look? That's a great question. If anyone has the answer to that, please pop over to Odyssey and put it in the chat. Nutritional, like the nutritional requirements from birth to retirement. as it changes throughout the life. Is that what you mean? Or the nutritional values of, like, yeah. I'd have to get a little more definition on exactly what it is you wanted to learn, but I don't have anything that that springs to mind. But when it comes to nutrition, I always default to and recommend Natasha Campbell McBride's book, Gut and Psychology Syndrome. That's my single favorite book on nutrition and diet. There are many others, but that's the one that I think was the game changer for me when I read that. It really tied a lot of things together, ironed out a lot of the apparently contradictory information that you get in that space. Okay. Next section is mink. The Danish government ordered the killing of 15 million mink over fears of a viral mutation. I didn't realize that there were that many mink in the world, let alone in Denmark. What do they do with them all? Is there really that much of a demand for mink coats these days? I thought they were rather old-fashioned and that mink coat lovers would find enough second-hand or previously enjoyed coats to keep them going. The slaughter is all part of the plan to get rid of all domestic animals, both farm animals and pets. Modern monetary theory. Those who believe in modern monetary theory argue that debt doesn't matter because central banks can always print as much money as they like and use taxes to slow things down if they suspect that inflation is growing. The problem with this theory is that inflation always comes very quickly. By the time the economists, bankers, and politicians have spotted a problem, it's too late to do anything about it, and inflation then runs away out of control. Modern monetary theory will lead to chaos, hyperinflation, and economic destruction. It's a tool in the hands of those promoting the Great Reset and Agenda 21. I think modern monetary theory as well, if I'm not mistaken, goes back to the likes of John Maynard Keynes, and he featured quite heavily in the Fabian Freeway. Not heavily, but he was in the Fabian Freeway book. But he was around at this sort of time as the Milner's Kindergarten and the Fabian Socialists, Fabian Society were doing their thing. He was close to all of those people, Cambridge Apostles as well, which included a Rothschild. So yeah, they're all swimming in the same sort of circles, and he's hailed as some kind of guru, some genius, some saint, but actually his system's a lot of bollocks and is designed to do what it's doing, which is to impoverish us all, take us into some sort of hyperinflationary scenario, which can then be used to excuse the rollout of some sort of digital currency linked to a digital ID that is then going to be pretty much game over. And game over, Not much more can be said about that. Endgame, innit? I mean, that's the title of the book. You expected it to be cheerful and uplifting, did you? I mean... Okay, we've got a section here on motor cars. The plan is to eradicate private motoring. The excuse for this is that private cars use up energy which cannot be spared. Motorists are blamed for damaging the environment and are, it is claimed, a major cause of global warming. There are huge taxes on buying a car, running it, and fueling it. Car parking becomes ever more difficult. It becomes increasingly difficult and expensive to take a car into a city. Toll roads are being introduced to make the cost of motoring ever more expensive. In London, Sadiq Khan, the mayor, wanted to close roads, make more cycle lanes, and make the English capital completely car-free. Taxi drivers had fought hard against the ban. A judge found that the proposal did not take into account the needs of the elderly or disabled who could not be reasonably expected to cycle, walk, or use public transport. The Mayor of London also wants to widen pavements to ensure that pedestrians have more space. Around the rest of the country, so-called low-traffic neighbourhoods have been set up by councils as part of the Green Revolution intended to keep people separated in the long term. Many of the changes which are already apparent are designed to make life unpleasant, if not downright difficult for motorists. So, for example, town and city centres are filled with strange pieces of road furniture which create traffic jams and, rather ironically, more pollution, since stop-go motoring massively increases the use of fuel and the production of waste gases. Speed limits are lowered to create more traffic jams, once again causing vehicles to use up more energy. Road taxes rise massively, except for electric cars, which still use the roads and which have been proven to require just as much, if not more, energy as cars using the traditional internal combustion engine, and so on, and so on. So yeah, that's another great example of just thinking a little critically and asking some deeper questions, like you did with the light bulbs, to point out that these proposed changes, these that are being pushed through, that are being advocated, and that we're basically being nudged into accepting and obeying, are not for the purpose that they say they're for, right? Because it's not making things better. And if you want to learn more about nudging, 2 books for you. One is Nudge by Thaler and Sunstein. That's Cass Sunstein. Improving decisions about health, wealth, and happiness. What it means is controlling you to make the decisions that they decide are the right decisions. So you can start with Nudge by Thaler and Sunstein. And then if you're like, yeah, but they would never actually do that. Not in England. Well, then you can read Inside the Nudge Unit by David Halpern. What's the Nudge Unit? Well, and there you see a quote on the back from the guy who wrote the first book I just showed you, Nudge, Cass Sunstein. Says, there is no better guide to governance in the 21st century. So the writer of this book is behavioral scientist and head of Number 10's Behavioral Insights team, or the Nudge Unit, invites you inside the unconventional multi-million-pound saving initiative that makes a big difference through influencing small, simple changes in our behavior. So you're being nudged every day, and that's what all these things are, right? So there's those books again, Nudge by Cass Sunstein, and then Inside the Nudge Unit by David Halpern. You're being nudged. You're being poked and prodded and manipulated to change your behavior. But the problem is that the reasons that they're telling you that they're doing it are blatantly bogus. Because as Vernon Coleman points out right here, you can see very clearly that all these changes don't reduce pollution. They do put people off wanting to drive, though, which is the goal. So that's why his analysis is actually more accurate, more revealing, and more true than the stated reason for these changes in our environment and our policy and our societies, right? So, continuing. In the UK, the government is planning massive changes to the highway code, including a hierarchy of road users to ensure that those who are believed to do the greatest harm have the greatest responsibility to reduce the danger they pose to others. Car drivers will, for example, have to give way to pedestrians waiting to cross the road, wherever they may be standing. And new safe speed limits and distances will be imposed on motorists overtaking cyclists and horse riders. All this will slow everything down, reduce productivity, and result in far more declining businesses. Just what the Agenda 21 enthusiasts are rooting for. In late 2020, the UK government announced that it was going to make it illegal to sell diesel or petrol motor cars from 2030. The previous arbitrary cut-off date was 2040, and bringing this forward by a decade will be ruinous for car companies and those involved in the servicing and repair of vehicles driven by internal combustion engines. The big question, however, is where does the government think the electricity will come from? Huge amounts of electricity will be required to power all the electric vehicles it's expecting to replace petrol and diesel-driven vehicles. In fact, of course, there obviously won't be anywhere near enough electricity to go around. The UK is already on the edge of a major electricity shortfall, and electric cars use up vast amounts of electricity. To deal with this problem, the government will dramatically limit the number of private motor vehicles allowed, and it will introduce massive road taxes on electric cars. By cutting the supplies to electric cars at unpredictable times, more and more drivers will be forced to stop using their vehicles. Existing petrol and diesel cars will be taxed out of existence. The impossibility of running a private vehicle will force people to move out of rural areas. The long-term plan is to stop private vehicle ownership and to force people into towns and cities so that they don't need to travel to work or to the shops. In February 2021, it was announced that motorists in the UK would be given £3,000 if they gave up their cars. The £3,000 would be available to spend on public transport, bicycles, and electric scooters. The elderly and frail who have no access to public transport and who are too unsure of themselves to ride bicycles or scooters will simply have to stay at home or move into flats in cities. Yes, it all ties in and links together. And the further we get through this book, the further you can see how everything connects, right? So, next we've got multiculturalism. And remember, everybody, diversity is unity. Multiculturalism was introduced as an early attempt to destroy nationalism. The bizarre and unpopular millennial celebrations held in London were an early version of Agenda 21, designed to help eradicate English nationalism. Anyone who opposes multiculturalism is automatically denounced as a racist. There's a lot more to be said on this topic, but he got the gist of it nicely there. For anyone who wants to know more, I would... we talked a little about the Charlemagne Prize. We read through a book on the channel, The Milner-Fabian Conspiracy. It took us about 16 videos. It's a long book, but it's epic. It's a real eye-opener, linking the Milner kindergarten group to the Fabian Society and their influences and impact on bringing about Islamification and multiculturalism in European countries. And I'm reading another book at the minute, which is volume 2. This one is volume 1, but I'm reading volume 2. The Blackening of Europe. And volume 2 has some really amazing statistics, very alarming. Like, for example, it analyzes 5 European countries. United Kingdom, Belgium, France, Germany, and Sweden. And it gives stats. And these are stats that are published by the United Nations and other just mainstream organizations. So they could be bollocks, but they might be true. And basically what it's saying is in all these places, the Islamic population has grown since the 1950s by 2,500% or thereabouts. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. But that is staggering when you think about it, like 2,500% growth in the Muslim population in 60 years, 70 years it'll be now. Although the book is using stats taken in 2015. So it's about 65 years thereabouts. For a population to grow that fast in that amount of time is pretty amazing. And if you project it out into the future, where's it going to go? Because what she also writes about in that book is the birth rates and how the birth rates of the native people are below replacement and the birth rates of the Muslim populations are above replacement level. So natives tend to be around 1.4, 1.6, and Muslim populations tend to be around 3, 2.8, 3, 3.2, these kind of levels. So there is a definite, obvious demographic transformation underway. And when you start to read about the people who won the Charlemagne Prize, particularly the first guy who won it, and you read books like The Blackening of Europe and The Milner-Fabian Conspiracy, you see, oh, this is all being done on purpose. This is all by design. This is policy from the highest levels being enacted and rolled out. To what end? For what purpose? Probably the rolling out and the installation of a digital ID, as was mentioned in the chat right at the beginning of this live stream. So, was it in the chat? No, it wasn't in the chat. It was in the Telegram Haze Reviews conversation. But I think that's what it's all leading towards, right? So there's a lot more to say on multiculturalism, but if you do want to know more about that, I recommend Claire Ellis's books, Blackening of Europe, Volume 1 and 2. And I also recommend The Milner-Fabian Conspiracy by Juan Ratiu. And that's a 2012 book, and it's been published in multiple editions. It's kind of expensive, but you can get the PDF fairly easily. And in fact, I linked to the PDF underneath one of my videos, so you can go and find that. But yeah, Most popular name a few years ago was Mohammed LJ. That's not just the UK as well. That's in all the countries I was just mentioning. Belgium, Germany, France as well. The same thing's happening. And apparently Marseille, I visited Marseille, and I'm never going to go back there. It was pretty grim. I mean, the city itself is beautiful. The way it's been designed, the old architecture, you can tell it was once upon a time a stunning place. But now it's been abandoned. Now it's being ravaged. Now it's just, it's grim. My wife and I really didn't feel safe walking around there at all, or being there at all. But apparently Marseille is going to become the first Muslim majority city in Europe. Somebody's predicted that. Frank Lennon says, Nick, do you have the book by Count RVCK? I don't have the book by him. Practical Idealism. I don't have that. I have a book about him somewhere around here. This book has one of the best titles of any of the books in my collection, which is Hitler's Cosmopolitan Bastard, Count Richard Kalergi and His Vision of Europe by Martin Bond. There he is. There's a man. So Hitler called this guy a cosmopolitan bastard. But I think this one is kind of in praise of Kalergi. Let's see, what does it say in here? He founded the Pan-European Union, offering a vision of peaceful, democratic unity for Europe with no borders, a common currency, and a single passport. Yeah, so it's is definitely praising the cosmopolitan bastard and bigging him up. But I bet there is still a lot of very useful information in there about Kalergi. A Mind Hack says very rightfully that the Blackening of Europe books, Claire Ellis, volumes 1 and 2, along with many other books, can be bought at the Arctos website, ARKTOS, Arctos. That's the publisher. And this one, it's there, look, Arctos, London 2020. See, I actually, this is one of the more expensive books. This cost me 25 quid secondhand. Usually you get secondhand books, it's like £4, £5. Sometimes it's £8. If it's £8, I'm like, I'm not sure, 8 quid, that's quite a bit. This one, I was like, I'll pay whatever. I knew, because there was 2 copies in this secondhand bookshop in Bristol. And I'm like, ooh, that's spicy. I'm going to buy that. And I was like, 25 quid. Every other book in the shop was like £3 or £4. and they jacked this one up to £25, probably thinking, oh, we'll make sure the racist who buys this has to shell out 25 quid for it. Anyway, I took it to the counter, to buy to the girl who was serving there, and I gave her the book, and she was like, "Oh, this one's a bit controversial," and I just said, "Have you read it?" And she said, "Some of it," and I could tell she was judging me. She was judging me for buying this. But I'm glad I got it because not a lot of copies available. Well, back then there were not a lot of copies of this available online. And this one starts with early European integration, and it starts talking about Kalergi and his pan-European movement, ethno-nationalism, sterilized, Euro-Africa, and then going by way of the Fabian Society and the Frankfurt School. London School of Economics is in here, the Frankfurt School. It's a really great book. And I haven't got a physical copy of Volume 2 because for some reason they were going to charge me £35 for postage, and the book itself was 25 or 35 or £30, and it was crazy expensive. So I don't have a physical copy of Volume 2 yet. This might be a good time to mention that you can support the channel by sending me a donation on Buy Me a Book and PayPal. But yeah, there you go. Bit of context for the topic of multiculturalism. All right. Yeah, David says, damn, another book for the list. I know. That's what it's... welcome to my everyday. pretty much every day I'm talking to people, I'm looking in groups, I'm reading, doing a bit of research, and then I just stumble upon 5 or 6 or 10 more books that I want to buy, and it just goes on forever. So, but some books you want to get a hold of them because the information is so occulted and hidden and charged, and that it's not that it's controversial, but that the people who try to talk about it get banned and censored and tarred and feathered, which in this day and age, in this era, tells me that there's something there. That person who's being tarred and feathered might be a racist, bigoted piece of shit, right? That person might be. But if they're being vilified, then there's usually some reason behind it, and therefore they're probably talking some kind of truth or trying to address some issue that is worth attention and worth our interest. And Tarot Galaxy says, I got Tower of Basil. Nice. That's Adam Lebor, I think. Lebor. Adam Lebor has a book, Tower of Basil. I think that would be good. David says, yes, I pay up for the super rare and censored books. I'm glad to hear that. I'm very glad to hear that. You won't regret it, for sure. Now we just got to wait for the David James Flood Reviews YouTube channel where we can watch you read them. Okay, next we got Haruki Murakami. Quote, everyone deep in their hearts is waiting for the end of the world to come. Well, that is a little bit pessimistic, isn't it? I don't know if that's true of everyone. Now I'm sitting here like, am I waiting for the end of the world in my heart? I don't think I am. I quite like things not being ended. Bit of a sweeping statement there, Haruki, but anyway, we'll move on a bit. So we're into N. I wasn't sure if I was going to start reading from N today, but it looks like the N section's only about 3 pages long. So let's do it, and then we can wrap up. Ooh, there's some good stuff coming up though in the O section. But yeah, we'll do N, and then we'll have some closing thoughts, and we'll call it a night. All right, N, named person. The Scottish government has a policy called Getting It Right for Every Child, which inevitably has its own acronym. GERFEC. GERFEC. The idea is to assign a state guardian to every person born in Scotland through its named person scheme. Sadly for Agenda 21 cultists, this nonsense was blocked by the Supreme Court, which showed a momentary and not entirely characteristic brush with common sense. The nonsense will doubtless return and will be revitalized. Yeah, it'll be rebranded. That's what'll happen. It'll be rebranded and it'll be brought in some other way. By the back door, roundabout, by the side entrance, whatever. But it'll still happen. Excuse me. The idea is that a named person appointed by the state will be a clear point of contact if a child or a young person wants support. As each child grows older, their contact will change from a health visitor to a head teacher. In large schools, it is likely that the head teacher will be the named person for more than 1,000 young pupils. I feel sure that head teachers will welcome this extra responsibility. Celine Lyon says, Hayes Reviews, do you have your live chat selected? There's top chat and a live chat option. I don't even know what you're talking about. Do I have my live chat selected? Oh, hang on. Oh, yeah, top chat and live chat. Right, I had top chat selected. And I didn't even know that. It never even occurred to me to flick between those two. So I had top chat selected this whole time. So if you'd been sending me stuff and I hadn't been commenting on it, it could have been getting filtered. Or sometimes I just can't comment on all the chats. So don't feel bad if I don't comment on your, genius piece of of verbal wizardry. Just can't get around to everybody and read a book and comment on it at the same time. But yeah, thanks for that. I didn't know that was a thing, but now I've got it to live chat, so I'll see everything that comes in. So please don't start spamming me. Because it says top chat. It says spam may not be visible. Spam, 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 spam. I'm partial to a bit of spam. Spam, spam eggs, spam sausage, spam and spam. That always goes down well on a Sunday morning. Okay, the next section is nanny state. The nanny state has been developing for many decades. The basic idea is to make us dependent on the state to do what we are told, to accept that the government knows best and that it is working in our best interests. In Britain, the state now provides everything for over a quarter of the population, and this proportion is rising rapidly. There are millions of people who grew up in a household where the only source of finance was the state. As an aside, the Scottish government also wants to introduce a new hate crime and public order bill, which will make virtually all commentary, criticism, and humour illegal. I can't wait for that. Doris says, Spamela Anderson. Yeah, I like that. That's good. I can't believe I've never heard that before. Did you come up with that? That's a good one. It's a very good one. All right, nationalism. There is no place for nationalism in the New World Order. Our new controllers, the ones who are planning a world government, will eradicate all signs of nationalism as both irrelevant and dangerous. Agenda 21 is specifically opposed to nationalism. Right, so nationalism it's good that it appears on the same page here as multiculturalism, because these two things are very, very closely connected. Because you got to get rid of nationalism, but only for one group, right? So if you are coming into the country, then it's a good thing for you to be nationalistic about the country that you've just left, right? So you bring your flags and your cuisine and your language and your culture and your religion and your way of dressing and your way of banking and your way of praying and your way of doing business. You can bring all that with you, and it will be protected and loved and looked after and cherished, and you will be allowed to be nationalistic about your country that you left to come here. That's good nationalism. Now, bad nationalism is if you are in the country that people are coming to and you want to preserve that culture and that cuisine and that way of dressing and that religion and that way of banking and that way of doing business and that way of interacting and the social norms and the gender rights and roles and all that sort of stuff. Now, if you want to preserve, if you're in a country and you want to preserve all that stuff, that's bad nationalism, right? You can't do that. But you can go to another country, and if you go to that other country, then you can celebrate all that stuff from the country that you left behind, and you can celebrate all that and do it all in that other country, and that's good nationalism. Okay? Just wanted to clear that up for people who might not be getting it, because it is a bit confusing. It's a bit counterproductive. I will admit that it is a bit counterproductive. But there's good nationalism and there's bad nationalism, and you got to make sure that you're doing the good nationalism. So, continuing, for example, campaigners who would vote for an independent Scotland and renewed membership of the European Union are voting for two complete opposites. I wonder how many Scottish voters understand this. It appears that no one at the Scottish National Party has worked this out, since the SNP seems to be keen to promote Agenda 21 ideas to support the European Union, and yet at the same time promote Scottish independence. However, if Scotland rejoins the EU, then Scotland will be no more than a region within the EU. Whatever happens, if Agenda 21 succeeds, there will never be an independent Scotland. Individual nations, however big or however small, will soon be gone. Not even the most patriotic of citizens will be able to save them. In a very short time, there will be no flags, no nations, no anthems. There will be one world, one flag, one anthem, one army, one government, and one leader. And that leader will probably be an Antichrist, or the Antichrist. I don't know. Okay, sorry, I'm just getting... So the live chat Right, I'll give you an example. Plane Drifter. Plane Drifter just made a comment, which is multiculturalism equals monoculture when none of the monoculture tribes get on. And that's only visible to me on the live chat setting. On the top chat setting, that comment that I just read out is not there. So there you go. That's the kind of quote unquote spam which YouTube is filtering out for us. God, thank you so much for pointing that out to me. It never even occurred to me to click that and explore between the two. So I'm going to go with live chat from now on. Rightio. So, next section is new normal. People have been taught to believe that things will go back to normal if they do as they are told, but things will never go back to normal unless we overthrow the people who are trying to force through the new normal. The new normal they have planned for us will consist of 2020 repeated endlessly. Martin Niemöller, quote, "First they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me." Nil by mouth. The letters NBM stand for nil by mouth. And that's now one of the commonest signs you'll see on the bed of an older patient. It's part of the official, legal, and government-approved Liverpool care pathway, and it means that the patient is being officially starved to death. It's the dehydration which probably causes most discomfort, of course. When the letters NBM are put on a patient's chart or at the end of their bed, it usually means that a doctor or a nurse, probably only half-trained, has decided that it is time for that patient to die by being starved to death or killed by a lack of fluids. Decisions of this type used to be made by a team of experienced doctors. Today, these decisions are made by junior doctors or nurses, and soon they're going to be made by AI. According to the UK Statistics Authority, 345 patients in British hospitals and British care homes died of thirst during the first part of 2020. That's just disgraceful. Okay. Last section for N, and then I think we'll wrap it up. Non-governmental organization. You're probably not going to believe this, but a non-governmental organization is a non-profit corporation that is independent from government control. NGOs sit comfortably between governments and private companies. There are pretty well no controls over what an NGO can do, and although they aren't supposed to make a profit, the staff do very well, thank you very much. Huge salaries, huge pensions, and huge expense accounts make life very good for the employees of most NGOs. Employees sometimes don't pay much, if anything, in tax, though they're supposed to be caring for the world and ostensibly trying to make it a better place. Mind you, United Nations staff don't believe in paying tax either. Asmelia Dayful says, "Sorry, Nick, I've got to go, but I've loved this. Thank you. And thanks to you guys in the chat. What a lovely lot of people you all are. Thanks." Oh, thank you for hanging out, Asmelia Dayful, and giving me a good laugh, because I genuinely made that mistake trying to pronounce your screen name there. But thanks for you for being here and for leaving your kind comment. That is really lovely. So enjoy the rest of your night. Yeah, NGOs. There you are. They're not governments and they're not corporations, but they can make a lot of money. I think that brings us to the end of tonight's reading. It's a good place to stop before we start the next letter. But a little look ahead to what we've got coming up. We've got Operation Lockstep. That's going to be a good one. George Orwell. Overpopulation. Thomas Paine. Pensions. Philanthropy. Police. A large section on called the Plan, and there's a section on political correctness and politicians. So there you are. And that is tonight's reading from Endgame, The Hidden Agenda 21 by Vernon Coleman. And you can check out his website. I did type it in the description of the video. It's Vernon Coleman. I think it's just vernoncoleman.com. It's very simple, easy to find a website. Check it out. Check him out. Buy his books. Why not? Why would you not want to buy this gentleman's books? I remember during during the Big C, I sent a video of Vernon Coleman to someone who I was trying to help wake them up a bit. I was trying to say, hey, listen to this video, listen to this what this guy had to say. Maybe it'll open your eyes a little bit to the scam that's being perpetrated against us, because none of it makes any sense. Listen to this guy's video, and the person I sent it to watched the video and then sent me a message back saying, yeah, but he's just trying to sell his books. No comment on the content of the video, the revelations, the information. Just saw that there was a link underneath to buy Vernon Coleman's books, and then disregarded the content and the old man in a chair just based on the fact that he was selling books. So it's strange, isn't it? There are people out there that seem to think that if you're in the business, well, I shouldn't phrase it that way. There's people out there who seem to think that if you're in this truth sphere of trying to get to the truth and spread it and help other people get to it, then you shouldn't be making money. You should just be doing it because it needs to be done. And I understand that argument, and I do empathize and sympathize with it, and I do put these broadcasts out. This channel's not monetized. I don't want YouTube's money. I really don't. I don't want them to stick irrelevant ads in the middle of my videos that have nothing to do with me or what I'm about. Plus, it would interfere with the flow of the videos. And even though it's not monetized, they still stick ads on these videos anyway, sometimes, which I think is infuriating. But, it's the price you pay to reach people, isn't it? This is where a lot of people hang out, as terrible as this platform is. But LJ says, I shared one too, and I got a message saying he's no doctor as he was struck off. Well, it's always the nonconformists who get struck off, isn't it? But then it always turns out to be the nonconformists who are right. The ones who go against the consensus, the ones who stand up and speak out when the rest of the people are just going along to get along. Like every important person throughout history has pretty much been a nonconformist rebel of some description. And it's only in hindsight where we go, oh, that person was really great. It was amazing that they stood up and spoke truth to power back in those times, isn't it? And what a hero they are. And oh, they're a hero of mine. And yet, when you are in, how can I phrase it? When it's happening, when you're living through it, most people who don't care will poo-poo and disregard and shout down the truth teller and the person who sticks their neck out to call out the injustice, and they won't receive accolades and praise and appreciation if in the main. They'll receive scorn and derision. And it's just incredible that we can see these lessons in history of the truth tellers and the rebels, and we can talk about them openly and say how much we admire them and celebrate them. And then yet when we have an opportunity to support a living truth-speaking rebel, that so many people will just find any excuse to disregard them and go along with the herd. But, people like to belong. People prioritize comfort above all else. So it's not too surprising. But I think the quality of the information is what we need to look at rather than the reputation and the history. The reputation and the history is relevant, but it doesn't negate or validate the quality of the information. And in my opinion, like, this whole book is good quality information. It links into other books that we're aware of. Like he mentioned the Club of Rome think tank. He's going to mention Operation Lockstep, the famous Rockefeller, from the Rockefeller document. He's talking about Delgado, physical control of the mind. Well, he was talking about that back in 1977. So it doesn't. So whether he was struck off, whether he handed in his license and gave it up voluntarily, whether he just walked away from the job and let it lapse. It doesn't matter because his information's good. And he's pointing to things that are real and that have actually happened. But yeah, that kind of reaction, LJ, I've received those sorts of reactions, and it's lazy thinking on behalf of the person who we're trying to help. And we are trying to help people by sending this kind of information. You know, it's good. It's worth bearing that in mind and reminding yourself that you're sending this because you care about people, and you're sending this kind of stuff out because you want other people to see through the lies and make better decisions in their lives so that they can be healthier and happier, more productive, and just have better outcomes, you know? So don't give up. Do not despair, and you know, keep banging your head against that wall, because one day you might get through. Yeah, I shouldn't laugh, sorry, but it is a bit like that sometimes. This is actually why I find it much easier to, you know, come onto a live stream and talk into a camera lens for 3 hours, because I find that easier than the eye rolling or the interruptions or the physical facial feedback that I can see when a person tunes out of what I'm trying to tell them face to face. Right? So I'm pretty sensitive, and I pick up on people's energy, and not in a woo-woo kind of energy sort of way. I just mean emotions. Like, I can tell if a person is tired, bored, lazy, frustrated, overwhelmed, sad, whatever the emotion is. I can sense it, and I usually feel responsible for it. So if I'm trying to explain something like this to somebody to help them because I care about them, and I can sense boredom, disbelief, frustration, irritation, then I tend to just say, fuck it. I just give up. I just say, right, fine. Like if me trying to help you because I care about you and trying to explain this important information to you from a place of love and care is making you bored and irritated, fine. I'll shut up. I'll not bother then. We can't talk about sports ball because I don't know anything about sports ball, but you know, we'll keep it surface level. How's the weather? What are you doing at the weekend? How's work going? Yeah, cool, nice. Job done. So that's why I actually find it easier to do this, where I don't need to sort of that energetic, that emotional like sensation doesn't interfere with my confidence in what I'm saying, and I can just sit here and rant into the camera for 3 hours uninterrupted. And then, you know, you can choose whether or not you want to sit through that, or whether you want to close off the video and go look at something else and spend your time on something else. It's like optional. It's you as the viewer can choose whether to spend your time with me or not. It's not like we're stuck in a physical location together and we have to make contact, make conversation. And it's like you have autonomy there to tune in or not tune in, right? So that's good. I like that arrangement. It works for me. Plain Drifter says, a bit of empathy and not the new speak empathetic. Well, to be empathetic, you have to be pathetic, right? But yeah, that's it. It's just about recognizing other people's emotional state and being sensitive to it. And that's all it is. And I don't think I'm better at it than most people, but I do think those of us who were born, let's say, I don't know, in the smartphone era. I didn't have a smartphone. I didn't have a mobile phone until my teens. I didn't have a smartphone until I was in my 20s. So I haven't, first chunk of my life I was not being bedazzled by smartphones and this kind of LCD screens of infinite novel information, although I did spend a lot of time on computer games and television. But I think the ones who grow up from a very young age with the iPhone and the iPads, they just don't have the ability to tune into other people's emotional states and to sense the frequency that other people are putting out. And I think of it in terms of music. I'll put out a frequency and you put out a frequency, and we either harmonize and we make a nice sounding chord, a nice harmony together, or it's dissonant and it clashes and it doesn't sound nice. And that's what feels good or feels bad when you talk about people's vibe, their energy. If you get a bad vibe from someone, you know, the vibe attracts your tribe, that kind of concept. I think all it is just it's nothing woo woo. It's like we're attuned. We should be able to do that. We should be able to sense another person's frequency and adjust accordingly. And that's what makes us human. But I think that's under attack as well. It's another one of the many aspects of our humanness that is being that somebody out there is waging war against. So Celine Lyons says, I appreciate you, Nick, but I think YouTube wants us in an echo chamber. Talking to people is a challenge, but you need to tune your evaluation of the individuals that you can communicate with. Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. I often reflect that I wish I did more in the real world. I really do. And I wish I would find the time, the courage to get out and have those conversations in the real world more often. But that's the great work. Or Mark Passio calls that the great work because he says that's the hardest work there is, to go out and change hearts and minds of people who do not care. And I keep coming back to this week. They don't care. This is what Alan Watt was saying. They just don't care. The world's run by a small clique of predatory psychopaths who are experts in human psychology, and they've built all the systems to funnel wealth, power, and prestige to themselves at the expense of everyone else. Don't care. Got my smartphone, got my Netflix, got my Deliveroo, got my monthly pay coming in, holiday once a year. Don't care about all that stuff. It's like, how do you get someone to care who doesn't care? Hard work. Really hard work. But I should do more of it. You know, I do feel that's on my conscience, that I should do more of it. So, yeah, it's tricky. Frank Lennon says, thanks, Nick. Another great reading session. You are very welcome. Thank you for joining in. I think you have been the most stalwart, consistent companion to these broadcasts since I started doing them, Frank. So sincere, heartfelt thanks to you for showing up time and time again. I really appreciate it. And great comment from Frank. NGO equals no good organization. Plane Drifter says, no freedom of information requests for NGOs. And we wonder why governments use them. Right, that's a great point. I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know you can do a FOIA request for NGOs, but it makes sense. Let's see what else we got. Celine Lyon says, if you Google Kalergi, it's a conspiracy theory. Yeah. Except they gave him the first Charlemagne Prize back in 1950. Plane Drifter, Kalergi was Rothschild's right-hand man. I can believe that. I'd like to know the book or the resource, the reference where that is described. It might even be referenced in one of these books around here. Let me check. Let me check Hitler's Cosmopolitan Bastard. All right, let's do a bit of research. We've got a few minutes left for the top of the hour. So we'll go to the index here. Yes, good. There is an index. That's great news. These days, if a book doesn't have an index, I'm just shaking my head like, how dare you? And we want to go to R. Oh, okay. So we go down here. We got Franklin D. Roosevelt. And then we got Louis Rothschild, page 102. Oh, good old Bertie Russell's in here as well. Bertie Russell. You know, sometimes going through the index is actually one of the most enjoyable parts of getting a book. And you just get a pencil and you go through and you just circle all the interesting names that pop up or topics. And this is part of what's called inspectional reading. And it's part of how you decide whether that book's going to be worth your time. Is don't even read, just go straight to the index and go through it just to see what comes up. So in this case, we got Bertrand Russell and we got Louis Rothschild. So we can check out the Louis Rothschild page, which is 102. Ba-ba-bum. What's going on? I don't even know the name Louis Rothschild, what he was famed for, well known for, or not. Right. So there's something here about the Warburgs, also bankers. Baron, there he is. Just before Hitler went on trial in Munich, RCK, so that'll be Kalergi, Kalergi struck gold in Vienna. Baron Louis Rothschild, head of the prominent Jewish banking house and a fellow Freemason, interesting, told Max Warburg, a Hamburg banking colleague, about this promising young man and his political ideas. Early in January, Max Warburg phoned Kalergi in Vienna to say he had read Pan-Europa, agreed with much of what Kalergi had written, and wanted to meet him. The upshot of the meeting was an offer of 60,000 gold marks, equivalent to £3,000 sterling then, or nearly £250,000 at today's prices. The condition was that it was seed money to fund Kalergi's political movement, the Pan-Europa Union, for the next 3 years, and that it would not be repeated. Half would be for the movement's development in Germany and the other half for the rest of Europe. There you go. There you go. Rothschild's man indeed. And while we're here, just as a final bit, we'll have a look at Bertie Russell, the Brussels, the Sprout. Okay, B. Russell 276. Let's find him. I'm guessing he's going to also be a fan of Kalergi. If the Rothschilds and the Warburg are throwing money at him, then I can only imagine that Bertie Russell is also a supporter. I was just scanning the page to find the name in it. Oh, there he is, Bertrand Russell. So it's an so it's some sort of meeting. It was an eclectic gathering. Within the 145-strong British contingent was a press baron, Lord Leighton, former editor of The Economist, international civil servant Sir Harold Butler, former head of the International Labour Office, literary critic and historian Professor Gilbert Murray, Lord Moran, Sir Adrian Boult, Bertrand Russell. Oh, so it's just mentioning him in a list of people who were attending some sort of event. But that's in the chapter behind Churchill. Oh, there's a picture on this page. The Congress of Europe. So it's the Congress of Europe. There you go. Yeah, this does sound like a book very much worth reading. But if I'm not mistaken, I think it has a little disclaimer in the front that says, "Thou shalt not broadcast this book electronically." Let's have a look. Without permission of the author. Oh, wait, maybe it doesn't. Hey, maybe it doesn't. So it just says printed on acid-free paper, library and canon publication. Oh, there you go. There's no warning in the front of this book that says we can't reproduce it without the permission. So that means we can potentially read it on the channel. Yippee. That's the way I make that decision. I just look in the front, and if it says do not reprint or reproduce this without the permission of the publisher, then I'm like, I probably won't read that on the channel. If the author's dead, I tend to feel all right reading it, because I think there's bigger ways to make money these days, rather than getting annoyed at people reading your books and suing them for copyright. But okay, I think we're at the end of the broadcast now. We got Cyril's Way saying, "My best friend, my dog Cyril, falls to sleep every time you on Nick. He's happy, which makes me happy. Thanks a million." Oh, that is awesome. Yeah, Cyril's Way, thank you. Thanks for popping in. All the best to you and your dog. I know what it's like to have a loving, loyal canine companion in your life. It is one of the best feelings ever. So that's great news. Matsy11A says it's worse than don't care. They actually support the shit. Yeah. But they support it in a way that, like, if you ask them, do you support the small group of predatory, psychopathic maniacs enslaving humanity? They'd be like, no, of course I don't support that. When you put it in terms of what it actually is, they would say, no, I don't support it. But it's because they don't care to scratch below the branding and to actually ask the deeper questions, to resolve the contradictions and actually say, okay, what is this system? What's it about? So if you phrase it in the way I just phrased it, 9 times out of 10 people say, no, I don't support that, But it's because they don't do any thinking, they don't do any critical analysis, they don't ask questions, they don't go deeper. and they support it through their like, what did I say at the beginning? Silence is taken as consent. So it's that tacit consent by just not caring enough to investigate and understand and go deep into these questions that they just support it. Yeah, by de facto. It's what Mark Passio calls de facto Satanism. And that's a brilliant presentation of his if you get time for that. De facto Satanism is really good. Tammy Plord, thank you. Loved it as usual. Thank you, Tammy. Awesome. Doris says, Frank's an absolute legend. There you are. Frank Lennon says, brilliant. Got him, Kalergi, and Rosa, 2 arch tossers. Yep. Timmy says, nice one, Timmy. Hermit Tramp, salute. Cyril's Way, the best ever. Thank you very much. LJ, thank you. Yeah, blessed weekend to you as well. Okay, cheers, everybody. Cheers, Celine Lyon, as well. You sent me an email. I'm going to check that out. Appreciate it. Thanks for the tip about top chat versus live chat as well. That's fantastic. I'm really happy that I know about that now. All right, let's wrap it then. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. Thanks for hanging out. This is great fun doing this. We're going to carry on with Endgame next Friday. We're going to do Between Two Ages after that. And if you join the book club, we're going to do the first global revolution in the book club starting in July. So allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. It's pinned at the top of the chat. That's got all the ways that you can find me and what I'm up to. Buy me a coffee, send me a donation on PayPal, or join the book club and hang out in real time on a video call and talk to me with your voice instead of through your keyboard. That would be really cool. I'd like to get to know people and meet and build relationships and get the community up and running. And, read more books together and do more exercising our active literacies. Because it's one thing to be passive, taking in lots of information, documentaries, videos, articles, Substack, blog posts, etc. But then you got to process it, and then you've got to put it back out into the world by way of whatever. Telling other people about it, teaching people, making your own presentations, blog posts, so it's like, it's a 3-step process. You got to take it in, but you've also got to put it out. You have to be the learner and the teacher at the same time. Because if you're just always learning, filling up, eventually you're going to pop. So you need to have that balance in your life of taking it in and also putting it out. And the book club is designed to help take you along that journey of becoming a passive consumer of information, and then going that next step to becoming a creative producer of information that will benefit other people, right? Because it's not enough that we know about this. We got to take it in, package it, put our own spin and our own views and make our own connections on it, and then put it back out there into the world and keep it alive, right? So that's what the book club's all about. There's a link on allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that. Exciting things to come. It's kind of a bit bare bones basic at the moment, but we're currently meeting every Wednesday for an hour. Yeah, I just call it the campfire meeting because that's where we just hang out and get to know each other and spend a bit of time together. But we're going to be starting, as I say, reading and studying the first global revolution very soon. I didn't intend to do a one-eye sign there. I just always do it because I'm like looking, but don't read into it too much. It's just a bad habit that I have. Hasdak says, I have nothing of intelligence to say. Well, even if it's not intelligent, if you can make people laugh, then it's worth saying, And I think we all have a lot more intelligent things to say than we tend to think give ourselves credit for. But anyway, I'll leave it there. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the rest of your week. We're heading into summer, so it's a great time to enjoy nature, get outside, get the sunshine, and spend time with your loved ones, do something creative, and just be human. Human becomings, human doings. Get active and do what you love, do what you're passionate about. No matter how small, it all adds up and it all counts. And that's all I got to say. So until next Friday, God bless.